All right, it's 12 o'clock Pacific, and we are here in San Diego. So glad to have you all here, and welcome to Deliver the Brain Healthcare of Tomorrow today. This is going to be a fully interactive session. We're so glad that you guys are all here in person. We have many more people on the stream. If you're watching on the stream, welcome. So glad that you're here as well. It is pretty boring to do webinars, so we like to try and get in front of an audience when we can. And part of it that's cool about it is that you get to see the people who are here in person. So Dr. Sherry Brewer, how long have we known each other? 20 years, I feel like, maybe. Dr. Sherry Brewer is here. I'm really glad you're here. Lauren is here, Functional Medicine Pharmacists Alliance. We better get this out the way now, in that, like, Lauren will chop me off at the knees if I don't say, look, the brain health care of the future, or actually of the present, has a pharmacist in that role. And, one of the things that everyone knows, if you're seeing patients and you're seeing patients who are dealing with cognitive decline, they're on a lot of medication in general. And ultimately, the role of the pharmacist, or should we say the polypharmacist, there's a role there for deprescribing. And so as you start to think about the team, we're going to be talking about scaling teams, scaling operations today. I'm very excited to share that we agree that pharmacists can play a role in the healthcare revolution. So catch that live right there. All right, lots of other friends in the room. Dr. Uli Isalo, he's going to be on later. He's going to be talking about bringing patients into your practice. We've spoken with so many practitioners over the last little while and realized that there's more to building a successful brain health practice than just the medicine. As much as we'd love to just do that, do the medicine, help the people in front of us, building an independent practice takes more, and that's why we have a range of partners. So Uli's going to be speaking a little bit later. We're super grateful to have the whole Serbo team in the house. Let's have a cheer. We've got a whole Serbo team in the house here. Serbo has been part of the ecosystem since 2014, the first functional forums. Back then it was MDHQ, and we're super grateful to have them in the mix, and so many practitioners across the country using Serbo as their EHR and building the foundation for this incredible clinical network that I think is starting to develop. Seth Conger's in the house. Seth, super excited for this. This has been part of our vision for a long time, and Seth and I have been in agreement with what needs to happen in the future of functional medicine for 7 years, and this is the latest iteration of our work together, and you'll see that here today. So if you're watching at home, there's plenty of other amazing people in here. Actually, Jill Valerius and I have been coming to the same conferences for a decade. Jill has one of the coolest functional medicine clinics in Alaska. Dr. Regina Drew's holistic heart health centers of the world, doing amazing things there. And many other people that are in the room, and many other amazing people from around the world. We just had the Alzheimer's Summit. We had about 35,000 people registered, 5,000 of them were practitioners, and many of you are watching now, and I'm really grateful for you to be here as well. I did promise you that this was going to be an interactive show, so I want to show you that you are going to be able to participate fully in this session. You can ask questions. If you pull up your phone here and you get the QR code, you can ask questions. Those questions can be voted on by everyone else who is watching too, so the best questions or the most popular ones can come up to the top. So that's going to be running throughout the whole presentation. So if you have questions, stick it in there. You can also see what questions are being asked. You can vote on those questions. So it's going to be a fully interactive presentation. All right, so the first question we're going to ask, and you guys can participate in here or at home, where are you watching from today? Let's see where people are watching from and participating. Super cool when you get the list of all the people that are watching, from a summit, and you see people in countries all around the world participating. One of the reasons why the Functional Forum took off in 2014 is that until the Functional Forum came along, there was really no free content online for doctors about functional medicine. And so people, if you didn't live in America, if you didn't live a little bit in England maybe, it wasn't very easy to learn about the functional medicine revolution, and that was the role that we played back then. So you can see, let's see who we got. We got Virginia, we got Brooklyn, we got Denmark, we got Nashville, we got Sao Paulo, Brazil. We got lots of different places popping in here already. So Denver, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Yeah, we got a bunch of people here. Plano, Dallas, Texas. All right, cool. So we are worldwide. Budapest, Hungary. All right. Well, this is wonderful to see everyone here and participating. This was the dream. Waji from Dubai. That's a good man. Put your name in there so I know who it is too. All right, let's get into it. So, what is the? I'm going to grab some water. Come and have a seat, ladies. Great to see you. All right, so how did this event come about? So I've done the pre-party to the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual conference every year since 2016. In fact, I should tell the story about how it came about, because it was in San Diego. So 2016, there's nothing happening on the Wednesday, and I rented an Airbnb near, and I invited a few people round to my apartment to have a few drinks on Wednesday night. Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, a few other characters. David Hasse was there. It was a great crew, Dallas Hartwig. And at the end of it, we took a picture and we put it on social media. And Andy Crosby, who used to work for IFM and now is part of Calroy, she came up to me. She says, I want to be invited to your pre-party next year. And I said, it's a deal as long as I can have the official pre-party of IFM. And she was like, okay, deal done. So in 2017, I don't know if you guys, any of you were there. Who was there in 2017? But it was on brain health. And that was really the moment where people found out about Dale Bredesen in the functional medicine community. You know, he'd been doing his thing before then, but ultimately this is it. And this was the party then. So you can see, you know, we did this pre-party, and we had Dale there to talk about, you know, the work that he was doing. And that was really the moment that a lot of people in the functional medicine community got inspired and empowered and recognized that the functional medicine operating system and what Dale was trying to do were, you know, a very good match. So when I say we're going to deliver the brain health care of tomorrow today, what does that look like? Well, what has Dale been doing in the years since? So this was 2018. This was a case series of 100 cases, and there's some cool people in there. You can see Dale here, number 1. Other people, Sharon Hausman-Cohen, we're going to be talking about her work a bit later today. Seth Conger, number 6. He's going to be speaking next. He was there, you know, he was in the mix. Greg Tanio, Mikhail Kogan, Anne Hathaway. A lot of amazing people participated in bringing together 100 studies to showcase this. Then there was a precision medicine approach to Alzheimer's disease. This was in the Journal of Alzheimer's in 2022. Again, you know, people there that you know. And then this was coming up here, sustained cognitive improvement in Alzheimer's disease patients following a precision medicine protocol. This was like, you know, showcasing that these gains can last for years. It's not about a short-term improvement and then a reduction. Like this is those benefits staying for a long time. So Dr. Bredesen's been busy doing his thing, and ultimately, you know, just a few months ago with the PLMI event that we did with TruNeura and Kristine, and Dr. Bredesen was there, he showed some of the preliminary outcomes from the current placebo-controlled trial, and guess what? Most people get better, right? And I know that there are people in this room right now that are practicing in this way, and you've seen it for yourself. It can be clinically challenging, but the potential here is transformational, and that is the healthcare of tomorrow that we could be practicing today. Now, this was also at that same party, and I wanted to share this because this photo, come on down, welcome, glad you guys are here. I saved the best seats for you. Sonia, welcome. Yeah, so I want a few people here. So this is an important photo in my life because I didn't know it at this point, but these are all functional medicine doctors from the Sacramento area, and I now live here. And my kids go to school with Dr. Shirok and Dr. Long's kids, and I live down the corner. My eldest daughter is like best friends with Dr. Shirok's daughter, and then obviously Dr. Kristine Burke here in the middle. Now, she became my doctor when I moved to Sacramento, so this was like a year, 2 years before I moved there. My wife's family's from there, but this was sort of the beginning, of my relationship with Dr. Burke. We had met a few times before, but this was a moment, and this was a moment where Kristine was like, I want to do this. Like, I want to do this with my career. This is meaningful enough and impactful enough. If Dr. Bredesen is right and we can reverse cognitive decline, I'm all in. I've got the reasons to do it for my family or otherwise. And so Kristine, you know, has been busy as well, doing her thing. And ultimately, it all came together a year and a half ago. So this is actually a picture of, you can see, this is me here. This is my dad. And ultimately, a year and a half ago at Christmas, I flew to South Africa to see my dad because he had had a major cognitive decline, a major rapid cognitive decline, right? So much so that everyone there thought he was either dead or about to die. And so I flew at a moment's notice, and I said to Kristine, hey, you know about cognitive decline. Like, what do you think's happened here? Bear in mind, it's literally the other side of the world. She's not only ever met him once 2 years ago and has never, knows nothing. And so she says at that moment, she says, when a cognitive decline is that rapid, it's typically an infection. So look for an infection, and if there's no infection, go and see if his apartment is moldy. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm armed with that information. So I show up, and basically my dad is almost, at this moment, is at the moment that I arrive, as close to death as you can be by being alive, right? Lying there, he's breathing, his eyes are closed for 3 days, not interacting at all, just lying in the bed. And all of the best doctors, the palliative care doctors are there saying, like, this is death, just get ready for it. But on the first day that I arrived, after I saw him and saw what was going on, I drove to his apartment, and thick black mold on the walls. You could see it. It had been a really wet spring in Cape Town. It was December. And I saw that, and I was like, I think I know what's happening here. And you think to yourself, like, how does Kristine know? Without ever having seen him, how would she know? And that's the sophistication that comes from doing this every day. So about 2 weeks later, it's Christmas, and this is me FaceTiming home. This is my 3-year-old then opening her Christmas presents. My 11-year-old is holding the phone, and my wife is sick in bed upstairs because she's running a business, and I've just left, and there's a lot going on. So this was kind of the worst Christmas ever in a certain way because I was dealing with that. But it also, when I came back, I said to Kristine, look, we have to do something about this. We have to find a way. Because ultimately what happens after this, I take my dad out of the moldy environment. Well, he was passed out in someone else's house. We take him to an ambulance to a friend's house who said we could stay with them. This was going to be like the last rites for my dad. We're going to have sort of community palliative care at the end of his life. Well, a week later, the lights turn on. 3 weeks later, he can get up and around. 5 weeks later, he can read 3 books a week, and Kristine was right. Kristine was right. It was an acute mold poisoning. Now, the bad news is, that does damage to you, right? It's not that it has no impact, but this was the moment that I came back from that trip with Kristine. I was like, how is it possible that you could know this from across the world, having never seen my dad, and what is it going to take for everyone to understand what's going on? And so this is what Kristine's been doing for the last few years. Since she met Dr. Bredesen at that event, she has, on average, a 4.4 increase in MoCA score across all of her patients. And that, for those people who know this game, this is insane, right? This is basically going from major cognitive impairment to minor to healthy. This is a whole category. It only goes from 0 to 30, and at 15 you have Alzheimer's. So this is the average score, and this is because Kristine came into this as a very accomplished functional medicine doctor, as a vascular specialist, and has been able to get these kind of outcomes. And so I encouraged her on this journey. We started speaking, and she showed me these sort of like janky spreadsheets that she had created to get all of the data in one place, right? When she first started doing this care, because of the amount of data that it takes to really understand what's going on, a workup for a patient with cognitive decline was 5 hours. 5 hours of work for a 1-hour appointment to get all the data, to synthesize it in your head, to work out what's going on, and then have a cogent experience in your appointment. And through working out these, connected Google Sheets with an MA, essentially in her office, a medical student, putting all the data into one spreadsheet, it had gone from 5 hours to 1 hour. because now at least all the data was in one place, and she could see the patterns. It was always in the same order. And I looked to her, and we looked at each other, and we said, look, we've got to do something to make it easier for doctors to understand this, because ultimately, how much unnecessary suffering is going on because people don't know what is driving the cognitive decline. Now, one note on Kristine. If you were expecting to see her today, I've got some bad news for you. She's in Greece. Which we don't need to feel so sorry for her. But Kristine, if you're watching, I know you're not actually, because I know the Wi-Fi is not good over there. She messaged me this morning. When she decided to work and create TruNeura, and I was like, hey, we're going to do this thing next year, IFM. We'll do an event, and we'll be ready for it. She's like, I got some bad news. I'm turning 60, and I've already got a vacation that's been planned 2 years out, so I'm definitely not going to be there. So she's not going to be there. But ultimately, what you're going to see today through all the different areas, like, look, everyone here, put your hand up if you'd like to run a practice where you could go for Greece for a month or Europe for a month, and the money wouldn't go down, and the operations would run, and you could just enjoy your 60th birthday. That's the dream, isn't it, really, right? And so this whole day is sort of an honor to Kristine. And what you're going to see today, a lot of the technology that's being used, she uses Serbo, right? A lot of you're going to see ViewMind a little bit later. She's got ViewMind in her office. So this is an homage to Kristine for her 60th birthday in Greece, while we're here grinding it out in San Diego with medium mixed weather and good company. All right, so this is for Kristine. So this is what she's been up to. All right, so let's talk about it. Reversing cognitive decline together in TruNeuro, what Kristine has come up with. It's the evolution of these spreadsheets. Today, this is what we're going to be talking about. So the first hour, we're going to be talking about the opportunity. The second hour, we're going to be talking about scaling operations. The third hour, we're going to be talking about the technology stack. Then the fourth hour, we're going to be talking about acquiring customers. As soon as we started doing things with TruNeuro, we brought in about 25 clinics to be in the beta test. We recognized that the vast majority of the questions and issues that practitioners had about launching a brain health program did not relate to the clinical medicine. The clinical medicine was actually not the easy part, because this is not easy medicine to do. That's part of the reason why TruNeuro exists. But it's like the scaling of the operations, bringing in new pain customers, making everything talk to each other. This was the differentiator between success and failure. And so that's why we started to bring an ecosystem of companies together to make it easy for any clinic, any doctor, any health system to deliver the brain health care of tomorrow today, and that's what we're going to be speaking about. All right, so we got another question for you. Shibin here, what are you most excited to learn about today? Which of these areas are the most exciting to you? You can operate through the Slido as before. We have new technology for diagnostics or treatment, new science on reversing cognitive decline. We have feasibility of launching a new vertical in my current practice and what that would look like, scaling my clinical operations. We have marketing a brain health program. What are we interested in here? What's going to be useful? Okay, new science on reversing cognitive decline coming up, number one. Feasibility of launching a new vertical. All right, we got some competition in the mix. All right, well, yeah, new technology for diagnostics and treatment. Okay, great. Wonderful. Also, all right, well, let's jump into it then. Let's talk a little bit about the opportunity. I want to talk about where we are right now in the world of functional medicine and why this is, I think, the most important opportunity in our space right now. Over the last little while, I have seen A4M write a number of blogs that we're going to look to here today. There's a little bit of text missing that I'll fill in. But essentially, brain disease is going through the roof. I mean, ultimately, in all different areas. This dementia is growing quickly. Mental health issues are going up recently. I've got a share 42% of Americans above 55 are at risk for developing dementia. This article, this blog from A4M, which they were using to launch their Cognition 360 conference, was extremely interesting, because ultimately it's showcasing the fact that there is an ever-increasing demand for brain health. We're going to hear from Tom Blue shortly here, who's going to sort of reflect the fact that this is true in the longevity market as well. But ultimately, you have a massive growing problem. And ultimately, if you've been following, you know that because we have like 20 years of science focused on beta amyloid plaque, where beta amyloid plaque, it's not even, it's pretty clear that it's not the cause and that it's actually happening like commensally at the, alongside other drivers of brain inflammation. You have a situation where there's lots of demand and there's almost no supply. So if you are the person that brings a brain health program to your community and you are able to showcase the outcomes that you can get, like there's not going to be a lot of competition for you, and there's plenty of people who have the budget to pay for it. All of these brain diseases are growing quickly: mental health, cognitive decline, Parkinson's, autism, and ultimately the opportunity here is, there's cognitive decline, there's mental health, there's longevity. We have a number of clinics that are doing TruNeura now that are marketing towards the perimenopause brain or the menopause brain. That's a really hot topic right now, and lots of clinics realizing that in that niche particularly, you have a situation where you have lots of patients, you have a good ability to pay, and you have not the same level as like intense clinical complexity as trying to deal with someone who is, in Alzheimer's right now, right? That is a tricky patient to work with. We're going to be making it easier, but that's a niche. So just so I know at home, which brain health niche are you most excited to help? And maybe you could put it in order. There's cognitive decline, root cause of mental health. I know you guys are all familiar with like metabolic psychiatry, right? That's starting to have its moment. Dr. Chris Palmer is popularizing it. Georgia Ede, lots of people talking about metabolic psychiatry. But also, one of the things that I learned last year from going to the Integrated Medicine for Mental Health conference is that really the root causes of cognitive decline and mental health are essentially the same. Look at the history of toxins in mental health, like lead poisoning. Look at the history of, look at pandas, right, in children. Pandas is an infection masquerading as a mental health breakdown, right? So you see that here. Menopause brain optimization, root cause of mental health. There's a lot that you can do here. And we have in our mastermind right now at TruNeura, we have lots of psychiatrists. We have lots of people who are wanting to do cognitive decline. Brain optimization is fun work if you can get it. It's certainly easy and fun to help people improve their brain health. Not quite as easy to convince people that they need it compared to if they have a problem, but certainly I know that's the dream for a lot of practitioners as well. And so the next part, I want to talk about the current landscape. And this is a blog. Anytime you see this format, this is a blog that you can read at truneuro.substack.com. I've been blogging there every week for this year, and I want to talk a little bit about the practitioner problem, the second practitioner problem. So those of you who know the history, in 2014 we started the Functional Forum. I wrote a book called The Evolution of Medicine, and still the goal, if you look online, you see the goal is to start 100,000 micro practices, right? Because the micro practice was something at that point that was attainable. The cost of starting a practice could go down from, let's say, $200,000 to $20,000. So many practitioners in the functional medicine space started to make their way to starting their own practice. Going against the trend, we might add, right? Everyone else is consolidation in medicine, primary care practices getting bought up by hospitals, but there was a brave few, and many of you in this room, I would classify as brave for your journey, who went through the journey of starting a cash-based, community-focused practice at that point. But if you look out into the industry here today, what percentage of those clinics are still micro practices? Are still one practitioner or one doctor doing their thing? It's pretty high. And I think it's because what I'm talking about with the second practitioner problem. And over the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to be faculty in Seth Conger's mastermind, which they have at Freedom Practice Coaching, called Legacy, which is only for clinics that do over $1 million in revenue. And really started to see those clinics are interested in scaling. And the issue is, when you scale, is the first practitioner, the person, it's typically you're passionate, you've been to 100 conferences, you've seen thousands of patients, you've developed intuition, pattern recognition, skills. Then you're faced with hiring the second practitioner. And you have a couple of choices. One, you can hire someone who's already very good at functional medicine. Not many of them are looking for a job, but you can. But they're going to cost $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 a year. And not many practitioners are ready to do that, right? To make that jump, to hire someone who's that good. So what are you going to do? You're going to hire someone who maybe is passionate like you were. You may see in them what you saw in yourself, which is like they're passionate. You can see that they want to learn. But on the first day they start seeing patients, they're operating at a much lower level than you. Like you may be doing it, let's just say, at 80% plus of its potential, right? If you're a seasoned functional medicine doctor, you've seen a lot of patients, you're a seasoned practitioner, you've been to conferences, you've learned it all, you'll be operating at 80%. So what happens if you have a second practitioner who's operating at 20? The problem with that is very hard to build a brand around medicine where there's such a big gap between the main practitioner and the second practitioner. But what are you meant to do? How are you meant to transfer that knowledge? You can go to the IFM annual conference and you can sit in lectures and try and do it, but there's a certain amount of practical skills that can only be learned from doing it. And so what I want to talk about here today is solving this second practitioner problem. And the analogy that I want to give is the bowling alley, right? Imagine your second practitioner, they are coming up to bowl. Actually, we've got almost the right floor for it in here. But they're coming up to bowl, and they're throwing gutter balls. Why are they throwing gutter balls? Because there are many things about functional medicine that are not taught in school, right? So one of the things in functional medicine might be you have to empower the patient to participate. This is a new skill for most practitioners, right? And so if you've never done that before, you don't know, if you've never been in the business of empowering people to participate, how do you know if they're going to do that? Synthesizing the data. If you have 10 PDFs of all of the lab data coming in, how do you make sure that that practitioner, that the new doctor is going to synthesize that data in a way that gives them the trend to help them understand where should we start first with this patient? These are all skills that take a long time to learn. And so ultimately, what we're going to talk about today is my recommendation, like if you've ever taken your kids bowling, right? If you take your kids the first time bowling and they do 12 gutter balls in a row or whatever that is, 22 gutter balls in a row, do you think they want to do bowling again? They don't want to do bowling again because it's sad. So what do you do with the kids? The bumpers, exactly. The bumpers is key. And what we're going to talk about a little bit today, I believe my analogy is correct. I believe that we now have bumpers for reversing cognitive decline. And that ultimately you can set up a new practitioner with the bumpers to make sure that they can at least knock down a few of the pins. Even if they're literally throwing it into the side, it eventually makes it through and a couple of pins get knocked down. We're going to have to be honest about this. We're going to have to be honest about the new competitors to the independent clinic, right? This is happening to all of you right now, where ultimately, if you were in the business of root cause medicine, you didn't really have a lot of competitors in your local area. But now there are very well-funded, very well-organized startups that go across all 50 states and are doing a segment of what you do or something that looks and sounds and feels like what you do to a lot of people in your community. Function being the most obvious one. And if function has led to an increase in your business in the last year because people are coming and they have the test and they don't know what to do, I would suggest that that is a temporary thing that is happening because Andreessen Horowitz is not investing in hundreds of millions into businesses if they're not going to own the customer. They're going to own the customer. And so this is happening. Superpower, Fountain Life, very similar functional medicine-ish. And even these are like the general ones. What about in the niches? Moldco, Ravel Health. These are digital-first solutions where they are going to help people with mold, to help people with Lyme, and available in all 50 states, and delivering similar care than practitioners. And even Vale Health. Seth and I last year had an opportunity to go and meet with Vale Health, and there are now hospitals that want to launch, longevity centers, functional medicine centers or otherwise. So we have to be real about the fact that the landscape in which the independent functional medicine practitioner is playing is changing, and to be hip to the fact that we need to deliver a service that feels as sexy and interesting as some of these services here. And then there's new expectations too. So a membership is a new expectation. People are used to being in memberships now. Wearable integration, we're going to talk a little bit about that moving forward. Holistic, it needs to be holistic in nature. AI enabled, you want to be able to chat to something, it needs to be comprehensive. I would venture that these are the new expectations from patients because of all the bombardment that they get with all these new cool AI-driven health tools. And so ultimately, it's like we have to raise the standard if you are running a functional medicine clinic to be able to compete in this market. And I would say to all of you that the competitive advantage that you have is you. And your skills, your relationships, the education that you have, the ability to be with someone, all of those organizations that I shared before, they will never be able to match that part of it. So my recommendation here is to double down into something that is you-focused. And ultimately, that's why we're talking a lot more about memberships. Think about the direct primary care movement, right? That's built on why do you sign up for direct primary care? You sign up because the patient is betting on the fact the patient wants to have this relationship with the practitioner. So now let's get into what's possible. So what I'm going to show you here is essentially how you can deliver at least a segment of the brain health care of tomorrow today, and how Kristine has essentially rethought the process of brain health and delivering brain health through TruNeura. So the first one, let's talk about the old way and then the TruNeura way. So the old way, let's talk about patient enrollment as the first thing. What does the patient enrollment experience look like? We all know that for a long time it's been basically this, right? It's not all this, but it is basically this. Ultimately, we think that there's a new way coming, which is that the patient downloads the app, engages with the AI coach, and starts to build a unique, personalized profile. And if you don't believe that this is the future, and this leads to more engagement, A4M wrote about it again last week, and it literally, I'm going to read this word for word. It says, the exponential rise of personalized health data marks a transformative moment in clinical practice, particularly physicians leading the charge in longevity and preventive medicine, where care was once rooted in retrospective snapshots. What's that? The intake form, right? And episodic encounters, practitioners now access to a continuous, real-time stream of physiological and behavioral metrics. The evolution repositions data not as supplementary, but as the foundation of a proactive, precision-based interventions capable of enhancing both lifespan and health span. Incredible. ChatGPT did a great job of writing that. But yeah, it's so true, and this is what's happening now. So data is the key thing that's happening. And so ultimately, what TruNeuro has created is a dashboard where you can see at a glance what's going on with a patient, what's going on with the root causes and the markers of interest, synthesizing the data in an effective way so that you know what is the theme, what could kill this person in the next 30 days, all the things that you're responsible for as a doctor. This is the bumpers that I'm referring to. All right, let's talk about the patient journey. We're going to show this on the patient journey, so we're going to show the patient journey across. So we started at patient enrollment. Let's talk about prepping for the patient visit as a practitioner. All right, the old way. You gather all the patient PDFs. Either this looks like those PDFs spread all out over your desk, or you have half a dozen tabs open on the screen, right? And you have, at best, a homogeneous patient pre-education process. What could this look like? All the data in one place in the same order every time. How do you do pattern recognition? You need to have the data in the same order every time, and this is one of the things that Kristine had in her original PowerPoint, in her original Google Sheets or in our original sheets, and essentially, has come forward into that. This is the foundation. The patient is now aware of their responsibilities and their actions, and this is the foundation for long-term engagement. And the answer is more participation. We got 8 pillars, and these pillars are lifestyle, psychosocial, and environment. And these are the things that, Kristine has seen. One of the things that you'll notice about these pillars, they are verbs, because participation is action. And rather than them being laid out like this, every patient has a score for each one of these actions and can see what their scores are in these different ways, and that those scores are being constantly updated so they know where is the most important place for them to focus. And then you can recommend protocols, prescribe it to the patient, and watch to see if they do that. And this is another blog that I wrote called Closing the Loop on Health Coaching. Show this to the health coach in your practice, and you will see a health coach that is excited. Why? Because for the first time ever, you can now see, the health coach can know whether or not the patient did the things that you recommended them. That has been the missing part, and it doesn't matter in conventional medicine whether that happens or not, because ultimately, you're not really requiring that much to do it. Look at all the technology that's come out around prescriptions, right? It's about a little dispenser that gives you the one drug at a day. That's the limit of what people want to do. If you want them to compose, rest, nourish, move, connect, grow, reflect, and remove all day, every day, you better have something that reminds them to do those things in ways that are supportive and lets you know whether you did them, or lets your coach know whether those things are happening. So what does this look like? More participation. So we've got more engagement, more participation. The old way, explaining each lab marker, reference range, and optimal range, and which way it should go. We've all done that, right? This is why the appointments take so long. Every marker has its own full range, its optimal range, and what's problematic if you're not in that optimal range. God, that's tiring. Isn't that boring? Right? Doing that all the time, every time, and it's a different thing. It's even different units, right? That is a grind. And if you exponentially multiply the amount of data you have to do this with, it's the worst grind. And so ultimately, what could it be? You have to synthesize and prioritize all of that in your head. Why is the practitioner not as good as you? Because this is hard. This is intellectually taxing. I'm sure you all know colleagues that have come and dabbled in functional medicine and then left because sports medicine is easier, right? You don't have to take your work home. But ultimately, conventional medicine can't reverse cognitive decline, so we're going to have to get good at this. So what does the new way look like? An easy-to-read dashboard that synthesizes the data, clear prioritization of root causes, additional practitioner-recommended action. Way more efficient. This is the journey that Kristine was talking about, from 5 hours of patient prep to 1 hour and more that. Anthony, can you grab, there's more water back there. I'm dying in the desert over here. And this is way more efficient. And so again, look at this. A metabolic inflammation score, a nutrients and mitochondria score. This is one dashboard: hormonal and trophic, cardiovascular, biome and biotoxins, chemical toxins, all in one place, and you can even see what's driving the lower scores in one viewpoint. This is what it's going to take. And then inside hormonal and trophic, all the labs laid out in a way that makes it easier for you to see them in order so that you can do the pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is extremely difficult if all the labs arrive in the different order depending on which lab you induce, because it's harder for the brain to remember. And these are some of the initial efficiencies that Kristine was able to unlock. All right, so the patient visit now, much more efficient. What about between visits? What's the old way? See you in 6 weeks. The protocol is written on a piece of paper. Contact us if you need anything. The problem with having appointments every 6 weeks is if the patient decides after 2 days that this is too complicated, you don't realize until 6 weeks later if they show up at all. Probably they don't book again. Now, if you have a nice membership model like Jill, right, then you know they're not disincentivized to come back. But ultimately, the model becomes part of the medicine, and that's what Seth's going to be talking a little bit later. But ultimately, this is the old way, and this is the way when I started running a clinic in 2005, this is how we did it. I know it hasn't changed that much, but this is the old way. What's the new way? A direct portal to the coaching team, real-time feedback on patient participation, and wearable integration. so that you can actually see whether the patient is sleeping well, whether the patient is doing what you've asked them to do. And you can find out the next day or the day after so that you can reinforce that and get back in touch if you need to do that. So that leads to more adherence and more successful. I wrote a blog called Wearables and Functional Medicine, Dream Team or Workflow Nightmare. It's been a workflow nightmare. You know, even the software that is used in clinics right now to visualize the data, and Kristine used one of them for 2 years, it didn't inspire the patient to take more action. It didn't make it easier for the practitioner to work out what was going on. All it did was create really annoying expectations about what was going to happen in the appointment. Because the patient expects you now, if you're getting the wearable data, to do something with it. Well, it better be easy and it better be actionable. Otherwise, it's just a drag on everyone's time. So now, between visits, more adherence and more successful. Retesting and follow-up. The old way, patient never returns because it's too hard. The PDFs are filed away, and you have no proven clinical outcomes, right? And we've been speaking to practitioners for years who, because of the way they've organized their practice on a fee-for-service basis, if the person doesn't come back, they don't know whether the person moved or died or whatever else. They just have no idea what happened. And this is costing us as a movement a lot. And so the new way is longitudinal composite health scoring. The software acts as an extender at much lower cost, and tracking and progress as outcomes is happening by default. You don't have to do it. It's just happening in the background. More proof of success. This is the blog that I wrote around the numbers. I talked about this a minute ago, the scoring. Ultimately, if you're interested, I think this is the reason why it hasn't gone mainstream. I say it there, it's too damn complicated. It needs to be easier. It needs for people to understand. Only the biohackers are nerdy enough to want to know about every range, what the range means, what the high means, the low means. The middle of the bell curve doesn't care. And so we're going to miss them if we keep making it as hard as we're making it right now. And so you can see a little bit about that, retesting and follow-up. And the last one, the maintenance program. What do you do? Even if you manage to keep people all the way along and you get them better, how do you keep them there? The old way, disconnected from the patient, no recurring revenue, patient only rebooks when new symptoms occur. There's a new way possible, recurring revenue maintenance program, continued refinement of goals and strategies, and the patient-practitioner relationship is supported long-term. A long-term gathering of data, a long-term relationship, and a model that allows all of it. And that leads to more referrals and more recurring revenue. So this is the potential patient journey that your patients could be going on. These are the buffers. This is the buffer that allows your new practitioner, when you hire that, do you want to just have another practitioner in your office, start again and start from scratch and just be a worse version of you? Or do you want them to launch a sexy new brain program where they have buffers that even if they're the worst bowler in the world, it bounces 3 times and knocks over a few pins? This is the opportunity. So if you want to book a demo with Anthony, you're going to hear from Anthony in a little bit later. He's our brain health specialist. If you're here in the room, you can check it out later. If you're coming tonight, you can check it out later. But if you're at home, if you're watching at home, you can book a demo to find out about this. And this is how you can deliver the brain health care of tomorrow today. It's one part of it. There is an ecosystem at play. As part of TruNeura, Kristine has been doing an incredible job in masterminding. You know, Kristine is probably guilty of being, like many of you, a conference addict and goes to about 10 a year and learns everything. And so imagine having this mold deep dive. This is basically like 20 years of going to conferences synthesized into an hour. Right? If you want to start a new practitioner wanting to learn what to do, it's extremely valuable. Kristine's an amazing educator. IFM has realized it. A4M has realized it. Lots of people realizing that she's the real deal, and she's been delivering this for a year. And then also inside TruNeuro, we have a program called How to Launch Your Brain Health Membership in 60 Days. A lot of that's what we're going to be talking about, some of the stuff that we'll be talking about today. You'll see some familiar faces. Here's Uli. Tom Blue's coming up next. Seth, who's going to be on a little bit longer. Anyone who's ever done a NPS score knows that getting anything close to 91 is ridiculous. That basically means that everyone is giving you a 10 out of 10 every time, or when one person's giving you an 8 or a 9. But that's essentially what we've heard from the last 6 months of Kristine as an educator to the True Neuro Mastermind. So if you want to find out about either of those things, you could book a demo here. You'll speak to Anthony. We've got the team ready to take a meeting with you. So how are we doing so far? Am I speaking too fast? Are we going too slow? All good? Let us know where you are, whether you're at home or whether you're in here. I'm ready for some feedback, but I'm going to stop talking in a minute. I'm going to hand it over. All good? Okay, good. Speed it up a bit, all right. I'll see what I can do. Need more water. All right. Look, and I guess the last thing before I hand over here is, ultimately the first thing that's going to happen here is we have practitioners using TruNeura, and you can see their little dots. But the vision here is really a true neural network where clinics each dot is bigger because the capacity of each clinic is growing by adding the second, third, fourth practitioner, using the software, and then ultimately the learnings that are coming from across the whole network are then being passed to all of the practitioners in the network. And we actually have something that can compete with a lot of the really exciting startups that are coming out and delivering, let's call it functional medicine-like, to lots of different people. All right, well, it's time for our first guest speaker, and we're still in the theme of the opportunity, and I'm very excited to bring to the stage today a friend and collaborator who I've been working with for, I think, almost more than 10 years, Tom. I think since I came to see you in Richmond. I think that was 2012 or 2013. But Tom certainly has his finger on the pulse of the industry and is going to be talking a little bit about what they've learned from listening to 700,000 people talk about longevity. Please welcome Tom Blue. You happy with that?
All right. Well, greetings, everyone. So this appears to be a talk on longevity, but the truth of the matter is that I discovered you cannot really have a conversation about longevity and the market for it without talking about cognition. And so James and I got to talking about this, and the study that I'll show you a brief look at. And if nothing else, I think you'll see that there is a new marketplace for cognitive health that's emerging. Part of it's born out of the emergence of some exciting new technology, and there is a phenomenal consumer appetite for it. So with that, let us get started. As James mentioned, this is a type of research that we did called social listening. And what social listening is, if you haven't heard of it, and most people haven't, it's a type of research that historically has been used to study brands. So companies, Facebook or Nike or whoever, would monitor the totality of social chatter about their brand and draw conclusions about, did that campaign work and how are people feeling about us and what have you. At Ovation Lab, we were, I think, the first people to shift the focus from a brand target to health outcomes, health conditions and diagnoses, or health objectives like longevity. And so we essentially eavesdropped on about 700,000 conversations that have taken place over the last 2 years in publicly accessible forums, and X and Reddit and Facebook groups and what have you. And then went through a really very careful filtering process to get conversations that pertain specifically to longevity, weren't commercials, weren't doctors talking to each other, to come out with insights. And you can begin to probe these findings and these conversations to find fascinating answers to all sorts of questions, some of which I'll show you today. One of the things that we discovered is despite the fact that longevity is considered to be somewhere between a $600 billion and maybe $1 trillion industry. I don't exactly know how that's calculated, but it's a big thing. Interestingly enough, there are no medical subspecialties associated with longevity. So is it primary care? Is it nutrition professionals, chiropractors, subspecialists of any kind? It's today, in the mind of the consumer, kind of anyone. And so all that's to say, it's not only an enormous market, but it is also an enormous sort of open field of opportunity for practitioners of all sorts to kind of step into it and play an expert role. So what we also learned was, and this to me is sort of, if you zoom way out, it's kind of the most, I kind of think it's one of the more interesting aspects of the entire sort of emergence of this marketplace, which is longevity blurring the lines between what has historically been looked at as wellness and what has historically been looked at as medical care. And it sits somewhere in a very squishy, fuzzy middle, which is kind of exciting less because of any particular science or technology, but more about what it says about the mindset of the consumer. And what I think we're now witnessing, it's like you can't have a $600 billion market if you don't have an enormous consumer appetite for this. And so today, it appears that every month, millions of consumers, and I'll show you the pathway that this is happening by, are sort of waking up to a transformation in what you might think of as their health locus of control. So we're sort of leaving this era, which has been going on for as long as modern healthcare has existed, where kind of the best the consumer can hope for out of the healthcare system is to avoid dying, avoid encounters with the healthcare system. It's sort of the avoidance of what we don't want. And we're transitioning into this new era of longevity medicine, which is really characterized by the creative pursuit of what we do want. And it's a very exciting time to be in the business of root cause medicine because, of course, so much of root cause medicine and the outcomes you generate are premised on drawing on the reserves of energy and effort that people have to spend on where they want their health to go. So we see that fanning the flames of longevity, we have high-profile investors, and we have cool science that the media loves to cover, and then we have the awakening of healthcare consumerism all coming together to cause this sort of explosive thing. Now, to put some numbers to it, what we found was, again, we did a 2-year look back so that we could say year over year how are numbers changing. And so what you can see is year-over-year growth in the discussion of longevity is about 29%. We can see that growth in the discussions of longevity as it relates to artificial intelligence is 109%. The excitement around AI is one of the things I think lending an enormous amount of plausibility to the concept of living longer and extending our health spans. We see, and congratulations really to True Diagnostic on this, 140% increase in biological aging discussion. And then we see another interesting thing is that in years past, the longevity discussion was really dominated by men, and I would project probably by the end of 2026, it'll be a 50-50 split. So there's a huge growth in women participating in this discussion. However, in a very different way. What we'll see in a moment when we look at personas is that there's actually a very, very big difference between the way men and women look at longevity. So let's look at demographics and motivations for a moment. So we asked the question of why is it that people want to live longer? And what we found was these things that probably you would expect. You want to be around loved ones more, achieve more. A big one being witnessing human progress as it's accelerating faster and faster, which is interesting. And then we have the question of why are you afraid to live longer, which is the first place that cognition begins to show up. And so, not surprisingly, people don't want to look worse as they age, and they don't want generally their health and robustness to deteriorate. But what we learned here, and you'll see echoes of this in the remainder of what I have to share with you, is that there is a fear of cognitive decline that appears to rival or maybe even exceed our fear of death. It's people do not want to live longer at the risk of losing their mental capacity. Of course, we don't want to outlive others, and people are beginning to think, how long will my savings last if I live to 150 years old? It's kind of a good question, actually. So anyway, this is the first look, and by the way, that cognitive decline theme, year over year, 26% increase. So one of the faster growing concerns that people have. So then we said, okay, can we tease apart personas in the longevity marketplace? What might different segments of this market look like? And it turns out that you can. One is, not surprisingly, the biohacker persona. It's overwhelmingly male. It's got a short attention span. It likes to do a lot of experimenting and then move to the next shiny thing, and is very happy to invest in the achievement of moving numbers, which is really distinct from the female audience. So men are quite happy to pour money and effort into moving their biological age score, as an example, banking on this is going to pay dividends later on. What we saw with women who mostly comprise the wellness seeker category is they want to know, A, is this intervention something that's specifically tailored for women? They want to understand what the outcome is, not just in the future, but what's the present benefit of doing this thing. And so there's a lot more just sort of rooted in common sense and good judgment, I think, in the wellness seeker category, which is growing quickly. I'll hop to the far right. There's a group. It's kind of interesting. They're the outright rejectors of longevity, but yet they're very active participants in the longevity conversation. And so what they enjoy is essentially pointing at Brian Johnson and characters like him, say, yeah, this extreme lifestyle is my rationale for not participating in any of this craziness. And so it's they have a place in the discussion, but not likely to be converted. And then there's this humongous bolus of people that we labeled the show me group. That is, they want it to be true. And the way it's promoted, it's a little oversold for them. They want a bit more proof, a little bit more sort of sobriety around this, but are an enormous group that is ripe for migrating into one of these other two buckets. But so much of it has to do with the way it's communicated. Now, talking about the pathway that people take to become a longevity enthusiast, it's actually kind of a similar pathway to becoming a root cause medicine enthusiast more broadly. What we see is there is a moment of awakening. We've seen this in functional medicine forever, where it's like people get fed up with the healthcare system, the experience they're having with it. They can't fathom that there's not something better to be found somewhere inside the healthcare system, and they begin to act like a consumer. And so they move from that sort of awakening step into beginning to invest in this case, optimization. And so they'll take small steps. And as that begins to bear fruit and they begin to get more comfortable with it, they move into an empowerment mindset, which is really characterized by overcoming the fears that all of us have when engaged in really serious preventive medicine. Has anybody ever done a whole body MRI? All right, a couple people. If you ever do that, it's like, it's very different. You're standing, you're like, I'm going to get in here, and there's no hiding from this thing. If I've got an aneurysm in my brain, if I've got a tumor somewhere, it's going to see it. You don't feel that way with a normal physical. You do your lab work, and you tap you on the knee and listen to your lungs, and you could be dying of pancreatic cancer, and no one's going to know. But with the whole body MRI, there's this sense that, you're not able to hide. And there's for people to make it into sort of this last bucket, they have, and this is where practitioners actually can play an enormous role in helping people make the transition. The concept of anything I learn is good news. If it's bad news, I've learned it early, and so therefore it's good news. It's a hurdle that people learn how to sort of get over, and then they become essentially in search of what I might term a health asset manager or a long-term relationship with a guide or a consultant from the world of healthcare practitioners that can sort of carry them onto this journey, both safely and financially responsibly. So one big takeaway that we took from this is that you can't speak, as you can kind of infer, you can't say the same things to all of these audiences and expect to get a consistent result. The thing that turns on the biohacker turns off the show me and the wellness seeker. So you kind of have to decide who it is that you want to talk to and how you want to talk. And we'll talk about characteristics of clinics that are both winning and jeopardizing in a few minutes. But it's a really, really important takeaway. I will tell you that the role and significance of cognitive health spans across all the categories. And so that's a very, very safe place to sort of center attention and grow a practice regardless of who you're trying to attract. So then we went in and said, okay, what are the characteristics of a clinic that make it kind of an outstanding showpiece in the world of longevity? And what we learned is that if you think about it, how do you know you have walked into a longevity health center? Well, there are only a few things to take into account. Number one is the story being told by the people who own the place. If they say it's a longevity center, well, okay, that's actually kind of the first step to being a longevity center. Because the same exact thing, you could be a deep phenotyping preventive medicine center, or you could be a longevity center, and it's just what you choose to say and how you language that. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is there are certain cues that we take from the products and the technologies that we witness in this place. So red light being one, sauna, cold plunge, plasma exchange, exosomes, peptides. There's certain product cues that sort of invoke longevity in the mind of consumers. And we discovered, I'll show you those right now. So what we found was, overwhelmingly, and again, in circles like this where everyone's more sophisticated, a couple of these are sort of duh, but in the mind of the consumer, you need to be really savvy at prescribing supplements. So the dark half of it, of the product association with longevity is supplements and really personalized supplementation, which is to say that supplement recommendations in longevity clinics are always overtly data-driven. And so in terms of just the choreography of returning results and making recommendations, this data-driven concept is really crucial. Then you have fitness, which is another sort of duh, but what we found is in financially constrained patients, they always opt for do-it-yourself fitness so that they can buy their supplements and then maybe head further down down that wheel into the world of fasting mimicking dieting, intermittent fasting. And then we see stem cells, peptides, which individually, from a longevity, in a longevity context, actually, there were more conversations about those two things than saunas and cold therapy, which I thought was kind of surprising, the awareness. But then you get into things that are smaller and smaller slivers. But that's how the product mix looks. So then we went to the next step and said, okay, what about the attributes of longevity clinics? And what we found there were a number of themes that kept coming out over and over that were things that patients loved about a particular experience in a longevity clinic. And then likewise, there were themes that came out on the other end of that continuum. On the positive side is this concept of personalized data-driven care. So the choreography, the theater of what it is that you're doing really needs to put on display that the conclusions you're drawing are driven by data. And different patients have a different appetite to hear the details of that, but that's a really, really big theme. I'll skip to the last one, which is curation. And this is one where there's a little bit of a tension that we need to talk about, which is patients want their practitioner to be the expert curator of cool stuff. There's all these things that we're all getting bombarded with on social media. Some of these things are stupid and a waste of money, and everyone knows it, but it's like hard to know which one's the stupid one. And so patients would love for their longevity expert to guide them in making smart investments as they build this portfolio. On the one hand, they're looking for you to have cutting-edge things they haven't heard of before. On the other hand, they don't want it to be oversold and too cutting-edge, unless you disclose that you're going to push the envelope on a thing. So the balancing of that tension is important. And then the last one is this concept of return on effort. And what we found is common sense. James mentioned this, I think, a moment ago, is all of us have a finite amount of effort that we can put into a thing, and we need to be rewarded as quickly and as often as possible with the sense that that effort is paying off. And so what we found is that there are certain outcomes, and we're going to talk about those in a moment, that are really high value to longevity seekers. But then there's this balancing effect of what is the actual perceived likelihood that I'm going to achieve that outcome? So if you think of this as a formula and that in the numerator, in the denominator, it's then how much does all this cost? How freaking hard is it? And how long is it going to take me 2 years to see any result at all? And depending on the persona, people have different tolerances for that denominator being higher or lower. But that's kind of the formula that people seem to be bringing to this. Now, the value killers in a clinic, overpromising and overselling, huge turnoff to most people. Another biggie is bad follow-up. So if you do one of these big physicals, you wind up with this book, it's handed to you, and you're just sort of lost. It's one of the reasons that the retention rates at places like Human Longevity, as an example, probably the canonical example of this, is so poor, is that you come out of it, you've got loads of things you could do, and they're willing to engage in none of them. And so that's a big problem. Then you have, of course, particularly in deep dives of preventive medicine, the risk of false alarms, scary findings that don't mean anything and are poorly kind of calibrated in the mind of the patient. So all things that you should guard against. Now for the things that are high ROI outcomes. What do people really want out of their longevity investment? And I'll call your attention to the red one again. You got to, at the top, you have generally feel better. Tough to beat that one. Then you have sleep quality. Now that we all are wearing Oura rings, we're all completely preoccupied with our daggone sleep quality. No one's getting enough deep sleep, too many interruptions, blah, blah, blah. And then our readiness score's not good when we wake up, and that's no good. People want to see movement in blood panel measures, and people want not just, this is the thing. They don't just not want Alzheimer's. They actually want to protect and even improve their cognitive capabilities. And so this is just a recurring theme that runs all the way down the age continuum to video gaming 26-year-olds who want faster reaction times. And so it's, the market for improving and protecting brain function is just enormous, and it's not just old people who would have been on Prevagen because they saw it on an infomercial. And then you have vascular health, which is an interesting one as well. What we saw, though, as I said earlier, is this fear of dementia is just huge, and people are, it's interesting to see vascular health make the top 5. It used to be vascular health was not having a heart attack. But there does appear to be an awakening to the fact that we've got some 60,000 miles of vessels running around, and consumers seem to be landing on the conclusion that the vessels are sort of feeding all your organ systems. They're really quite foundational, and I think they're beginning to actually recognize the connection between cognition and vascular health. So it's a really interesting thing to see. Then, of course, you have the gamification of longevity. I kind of think that Brian Johnson's coolest contribution to longevity is this very concept of turning it into a sport. Have you all seen this Rejuvenation Olympics? RejuvenationOlympics.com. It is a leaderboard. The scorekeeping mechanism is the True Diagnostic Test, and their Dunedin pace. And you can go in, and frankly, I mean, there's thousands of people now on the leaderboard. But you'll notice off on the far left, there's a category called Managing Clinic. Brian was looking essentially for a way to discover which clinics around the country were doing the best with slowing biological aging, and this became the mechanism for doing that. But it's a really, really cool, underutilized thing that I think folks could take great advantage of. So I'll conclude this. There are a couple of technologies that jump right out as being particularly relevant to both sort of the intersection of longevity and cognitive health. The first one, it speaks to something I was talking about just a moment ago, which is what I'm referring to as the cognitive performance market. So not just the cognitive decline, but the cognitive performance market. Now this has been, if you think about it, it's been an aspiration, and many, many supplement products that we tell it's going to improve brain performance. Well, it's impossible for folks to really tell whether that's true or not, and what we've seen in decentralized studies of brain supplements is that the self-reported measures are so influenced by the placebo effect that you can't get a signal. That's changed, however, and so in the world of cognitive performance, I believe that it's being unlocked by eye tracking technology. This has been something kind of on the horizon for 12 years. I believe is the first time I saw it at Exponential Medicine, but last year I came upon a company that was using eye tracking through a tweaked up virtual reality headset to do Alzheimer's drug studies, and they had an enormous amount of publications on the product, and I mean sufficient to get pharma companies to study the product with their technology. It's called ViewMind. It's one of James's collaborators and a company I've been excited to get to sort of draw into this world. They have built this thing. It is a 15-minute eye tracking test that then quantifies cognition to produce a report like this that's actually putting numbers to 6 domains of cognitive function: selective attention, sustained attention, spatial perception, working memory, etc. And it is super sensitive. And so I predict that we're going to start seeing natural products studied using this technology, protocols studied using this technology, registry studies built to track the outcomes in a way that actually is sort of pharmaceutical grade. So it's a big game-changing technology. The last one, and we saw sleep a moment ago. Imagine an Oura ring where all the measures are FDA cleared. And this is a thing that we're going to see probably emerge into our world next month called the Happy Ring, the first application of which is actually doing sleep studies that then get you a diagnosis for sleep apnea if you happen to have it, and it becomes a remote patient monitoring technology. It took a little wrestling to get it away from just the dental industry into our world, but in fact now they're going to be inviting practitioners to do this. They make the diagnosis and the provision of therapy completely turnkey, so you don't have to do anything. You don't have to. They have a 50-state sleep practice that takes care of it all for you. So those are the things. The last vision that they have is ultimately a sleep physical, where it just becomes a part of the health assessment for every new patient. Whether or not you're looking for sleep apnea, it looks at many other things that can be acted upon. So there you have it in a nutshell. If you want any of this, you can send me an email. I'm happy to send the presentation off to you. And then if you have any interest in being introduced to either of these two companies, I'm happy to do that as well. And it was lovely to talk to all of you.
All right, let's have a round of applause for Tom. Tom, thanks so much.
Right.
Just stay here for a sec.
Yeah.
You know, so Tom and I were on a call maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and we were just, talking about TruNeura and what it did, and they've known Kristine for a long time too. And you, on the phone, just sort of off the cuff said, what if this whole business was a registry study? And I'd just love for you to check in on, like, we are going to do that.
Yeah.
And what you think the benefits are, and like what you think would be possible with a software collecting the data across a whole network of practices and then learning from that data.
Well, this is as James pointed out, one of the problems that we've had in the functional medicine world forever has been an absence of sort of large-scale evidence. And a big part of that problem has to do with the fact that everyone's intervention is a bit different. There's all kinds of challenges that make that, not an embarrassing thing. It's just a reality of the difficulties. TruNeura, however, presents a really interesting opportunity as a data repository, and it's sort of doing it anyway, tracking outcomes across all the practices, across the neural network. I like that.
You like that?
Yeah, that was very good. So now it's simply a matter of opting in, and we can have an IRB registered clinicaltrials.gov registered registry study that just goes on in perpetuity, and we can begin to study the protocols and maybe even the nuances among practices to say, oh my gosh, Sherry's practice is crushing it. What are you doing? And it just gives an objective way, to quantify in large numbers across a distributed number of practices the impact of something that its time has come.
So that's what we're going to do. All right, thanks very much, Tom.
All right.
Appreciate it. All right, we're going to jump in to the next section. Thanks so much for sending all your questions in. Will this be available as a recording? Yes, it will. If you've registered, you can have the recording and it'll be available. How does TruNeura FAQ to help understand what a membership means? Will Intellect's DNA be part of the TruNeura program? Hang on for about another hour and you'll find out the answer to that question. On the feasibility side, how long to nurture patients to convince them that the labs are worth the investment? Do they need a relationship with you first? Dr. Ula Isalo is going to be talking about that. So we've got a lot of cool things coming. All right. We're going to talk about the practicality of actually doing this and actually scaling a clinic that could actually help enough people in your practice. One of the things that I've been focused on all the way through the evolution of medicine is how do you solve the problem at the level that it exists? And if cognitive decline, all these things are going up, we need a lot of capacity really quickly. And ultimately what that looks like is solving what I talked about at the beginning. How do we help more clinics go from 1 practitioner to 10 practitioners? How do we 10x or 20x or 50x the capacity of one clinic? Because the demand is there, the need is there, the delivery systems are there, the software is there, it's all starting to happen. And there's literally no one better to do it than Seth Conger in this world, because Seth, as you'll find out shortly, built, scaled, and sold a practice in cognitive decline. I showed you earlier he was responsible for a good number of those Bredesen 100 back in 2018. So please welcome Seth Conger.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to have a real fun conversation today. I saw on the original poll that 10% of people were interested in clinical operations and scaling those. So my hope is that I can bring a little bit of enlightenment to this to all of the other 90% of people who may not be so interested. What I want to share here is that I look at businesses in the health industry very much like all of you look at health, right? It is an interconnected system, and it is not so dissimilar. Building a business is not so dissimilar to actually treating health with the foundations, right? So when we look at these interconnected systems, when we look at these levers that we need to pull together, we have to understand that there is going to be an associated effect to that. And your business and how your business is running there's a direct correlation to how well your business runs and how many lives you can transform. So this is me at age 6. And at age 6, I told my grandfather, Jack, that I was going to become a doctor to help him with his medical issues. And at that time, he just had poor knees. You see, he was just forced to retire as the head of ski patrol for the entire state of New Hampshire because his knees couldn't handle it anymore. And just that same year, I had won my first bronze medal in my first ever ski race. Things were on track. I was accepted to the University of Vermont, which had a D1 ski racing program. They have an amazing pre-med program as well. And everything was fantastic until my senior year of high school, where I split one of those gates in half with my head at 60 miles an hour. 4 more concussions in 3 months. And all of a sudden, I passed on UVM, and I ended up at my safety school that fall. When I opened my first book in college, I couldn't comprehend what I was reading. I was depressed and anxious, so I went to go see a therapist, and they told me I was probably homesick. I went to go see a medical doctor because I was sleeping through class, because I wasn't sleeping at night. They tried to give me drugs. And finally, about halfway through my first semester, the dean of students landed the final blow. And he pulled me aside and said, "Son, you're just not smart enough for pre-med. So if you want to stay in this college, I would suggest something easier. Why don't we try business?" So I did. And my first job outside of college was ESPN Monday Night Football. And I went on to have a career that spanned over a decade working with Fortune 500 companies designing event marketing tours, manning those tours, and then executing them. We worked with Coca-Cola, American Express, the US Army, Verizon Wireless, and many more. And I had an incredible experience learning logistics, learning management, learning hiring, and learning business at the largest stage. But throughout this pace, my grandfather, Jack, he's there in the middle. That's my mom on the left. We're not sure where I came from with the height. The knees weren't the only thing ailing Jack any longer. So hearing loss had crept in, and now macular degeneration. And we lost my grandmother in 2007. So what happens after that? Loneliness. We saw the first signs of cognitive decline with Jack starting around 2007. And in 2010, on December 19th, which just happens to be my birthday, my grandfather took his own life. You see, I knew what he was going through because I was also experiencing cognitive decline, but nobody could tell me what I was going through at that time. In 2013, I was getting tired of working in this marketing company. I met my wife, Margaret, in Charlotte, North Carolina, and her father happens to be a lifestyle medicine physician. And we were out having a glass of wine, and he said, "Seth, I really need some help with marketing. Can you please help me get some more patients?" I said, "Ronnie, no offense. I literally spend more money in a weekend than your entire annual revenue with my marketing events. I don't know how to attract patients." He said, "Well, why don't you come with us? We're going to go to this conference in Vegas in a couple weeks. I'd like you to come with us." And it just happened to be an A4M conference. And I got to see this transformation there that I didn't believe was actually real. I got to see aligned incentives for the first time. I got to see these technologies and these practitioners that were actually having a positive impact on health. And at that time, I was still in this deep depression that I had failed my grandfather and that I had not kept my promise to him. And so the last night at A4M, we were sitting at the bar, having a glass of wine, and my father-in-law turns to me and he says, "You know, we do hormone replacement therapy, we do nutrition, we sell a lot of supplements, but really my passion is actually brain health. And if I only had a way to understand functional brain health, we would be off and moving and we can change the world." So we turned to the guys to the left, and they were wearing A4M badges, and we say, "What do you do?" And they said, "Well, we actually have a device that tracks brain health. It's called a quantitative electroencephalogram." We were like, "What? What are the chances?" And it was David Hagedorn and James Thompson from a company called Evoke Neurosciences, and they literally had a briefcase that looked just like this. It was $25,000. We wrote them a check and passed it across the bar there and flew home to Charlotte, North Carolina with this briefcase. So we get there, and we're like, well, who's going to do this? So I get to be the guinea pig, and my father-in-law puts the cap on, and you have to gel up the whole cap, and we do this whole set of tests over about an hour, and we send it off to Dr. Hagedorn. And he calls me up about a week later, and he says, hi, Seth, how many concussions have you had? I said, none recently. He said, that doesn't matter. How many concussions have you had? I can see the signature in your brain maps. And I broke down crying. I hadn't told anybody. Everybody was dismissive about it. This is the first time I felt seen. And we put together a protocol of neurofeedback, of hormone replacement therapy, of supplements, of exercise, of very specific nutrition, and even fasting. And in 6 months, my brain map went from there to there. My processing speed went from the 23rd percentile to the 99th. And I realized at this point that I could keep my promise to my grandfather, Jack. So what are we going to learn today? What we're going to learn today is that most businesses fail because they actually apply the right thing at the wrong time. There are 3 natural phases of growth for any business, but really for health practices, we have startup, we have growth, and we have scale. We're going to walk through each one of them, and I'm going to show you how I went through this journey with Carolina Healthspan Institute, the practice that my father-in-law owned in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that I helped scale and exit. So we're going to walk through that journey together, but also in light of the hundreds of practices that I've now been involved with in a coaching aspect at Freedom Practice Coaching. And my hope is at the end of this, you'll walk away with an understanding of where you are today. And this, if you don't have a health practice, you maybe have a health business or something that is tangential, you'll also be able to take this assessment that will be up at the end. It's about a 60-question assessment that is going to help you identify where you are, which is the first step in this process of scaling a business. So what are these 3 different phases? Well, 3 different phases are startup, which I call the reactive mode, right? You are trying to survive as a business. You may be a visionary founder, you had an idea and you wanted to get it out there in the world. You have to react to what is coming to you until you find what we like to call product market fit, which I will explain a little bit later. This is when it is critical to understand how am I going to acquire patients and how am I going to apply an appropriate business model, right? When we get into growth, our mindset needs to shift, right? We don't forget about patient acquisition. We don't forget about the initial business model that we applied in the first place, but we move on to putting the same level of attention and focus on things like hiring, on systems, and profitability. And then finally, when we get into scale, we need to remove ourselves from the business and we start thinking about leadership. We actually go back to vision from where we started from in the beginning, but we go back to vision not as idea seeking, but rather seeing the vision of the future and how we expand this, right? Business independence comes in, but if you don't know what stage you're in, you don't know what to do in each one of those areas. So let's ask yourself some questions and feel free to just think about these as we go through these questions. We'll do them for each level as we walk through this today. So number 1, startup. Are you worried about consistently getting new patients? Is everything in your practice dependent on you? And do you feel like you're trading time for money? If you said yes to most of these questions, then you are likely in the startup phase. When you're in the startup phase, your focus needs to be product market fit. So what does product market fit mean? Well, this is a term out of technology businesses, which really just means I have a product or a service that the market wants, and they will actually pay me for it. And reliably, I can acquire customers. It could just be through word of mouth. It could be through referral. There's many different channels of that. But I have customers who want to come and pay me for this service. Once you have found product market fit, you don't have to tinker with it anymore. Many people do. They keep tinkering with their service and their offering, and they want to keep changing that and modifying that service and their offering, and really they're just spinning their wheels when they should be paying attention to other things in the business. The biggest mistake here is actually choosing the wrong business model. So in health practices, there's 4 main business models. We have insurance, we have fee-for-service, we have memberships, and we have programs. We're going to, on the next slide, actually dive deep into each one of these business models. But choosing the wrong business model will actually change the way your entire business scales as you go. So we're gonna see which business model is the best fit for your particular business and what you're trying to achieve at the end, right? What is that aligned incentive for you? So the key shift here is really focusing on a sustainable business model that allows you not to have to trade time for money, but aligns the incentives of what you get with what your patient wants to achieve. Right? So that's the first thing that you want to shift. And then the second is defining your offer and your avatar. Your avatar is just the ideal customer that you want to come in and see you, and create a plan for how you are going to acquire your best customers. So before we jump into that, let's talk about these business models, right? Insurance. Let's be really clear. The insurance model is extremely good for insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, period. We don't have to talk about that any further. We're gonna move on to fee-for-service. Fee-for-service looks like insurance, so this is very familiar to many of the practitioners. It's very familiar to the patients, and you may feel like that comfort allows people to come to you quicker, right? But the breakdown with fee-for-service is actually it's extremely challenging to scale, because all of a sudden your main problem becomes, how do I manage my schedule? I can't leave, because if I leave, money is left on the table. All of these appointments are actually worth something, right? So the value becomes really challenging in trying to scale. So what do? Well, I add more practitioners and more practitioners in the same fee-for-service model, and you don't have the predictability of when are the patients actually going to come back, and the patients don't have the predictability of what do I need to do next to get to the outcome that I want to achieve. So moving away from fee-for-service is really the first choice that we like to see health practices make. Because if you move away from fee-for-service, choosing one of the models, such as programs or memberships, can really get you to that next place and set you on a path of where you want to go in the future. So these models, and in combination, are actually beautiful together, but usually you just choose one to start with. And they have different intentions to them. So let's talk about that. Programs, or you may have heard of high tickets, right? Programs are great for cash injection. So if you have very low runway or not a whole lot of money to start your business up, what you don't want to do is choose a membership and start accepting $194 a month. You may run out of money before you're able to actually get enough patients in the door. So programs are great for cash injection because you get paid up front for this, but then you need to deliver on that service. Programs are also fantastic for aligning with outcomes. We call this a destination model, right? So when you are presenting a program to a patient, you want to talk about this as a destination. We know where you want to go. We know the outcome you want to achieve. In order to achieve that outcome, we need to do all of these things. There are going to be labs, there'll be supplements, there's going to be likely an educational curriculum, there'll be quite a bit of work that you need to do on your end, and then we'll be doing quite a bit of work, and we'd like to include all of that so you don't have to think about what you're going to get. All you have to think about is the actions you need to take that we're in agreement for to get to that outcome that you want to achieve. It's a really beautifully aligned business model, and if you think about that, that alignment breeds trust. You don't have to sell every single time that person walks in the room. They understand the economics of that, and it allows you as a business to understand the economics of those programs, right? You can build in your hard costs, you can build in your practitioner time, you can build in the profit. We call these kind of a profit-first type of model, and those unit economics play out over time where then you can manage your business in a really healthy way to have predictability of how many new people do you need to see each month to make a certain amount of money out on the back end, right? This also allows you to really understand how do I build in things that are going to be great for my future, such as data. Should I have 2 sets of labs for every single program that comes in, or should I even have 3, right? And you're not having to haggle with your patient at the end of the program to get the data that you need to learn and for them to understand what they need to do next. Now, the only problem with programs is it becomes a monster at scale. You build up your entire team based on seeing 10 new patients a month, 15 new patients a month, 20 new patients a month, and then you have to sustain that. And every month you start at 0, right? So you have to sell 15 new patients a month just to meet your payroll, and all of a sudden you get locked into this. So that's where we like memberships. memberships are recurring revenue, right? So think about this as subscriptions. This is really the North Star for any business, right? Again, extremely hard from 0 to 1 to start this up unless you have a long list of patients that you can actually convert from insurance or fee-for-service directly into membership. But this is what we want to work on over time, because if you can build that recurring revenue and it takes care of all the costs in your business, then all of a sudden you've bought yourself that freedom. You don't have to bring in new patients. You still may want to, right? But you can on your own terms. And if you want to take that month-long trip in Greece, then you can absolutely do that. So these are the different models. Again, the North Star and what you really want to achieve, if possible, is a program and membership combination, especially if you're working in a field like cognitive decline, where there is a whole period of time in the beginning where you have to do an incredible amount of work, and then it is a lifelong journey, right? So think of programs as a destination model, think of memberships as a journey model. So let me tell you a little story about Carolina Healthspan Institute. So my father-in-law had this practice before I came along from 2004 to 2013. He was comfortably doing $90,000 a month in revenue. He was working 4 days a week. He had a list of 10,000 patients. 3,000 of them were active, meaning they showed up at least once per year. But again, there was no predictability to that. He didn't know when people were going to come back. He didn't know when they were going to show up. They were just really beholden to the phone ringing, and with the understanding that somebody was actually going to show up for an appointment. So there would be wild swings of 20 to 30% of revenue every single month, which definitely impacted cash flow, right? So the symptoms were, my father-in-law was bored, right? Let's buy a $25,000 briefcase that we know nothing about and bring it into the practice. And what are we going to do? Well, we have this stable base. So if we have this stable base, of course, a second location makes sense. And of course, we should add on more services that we don't know anything about, right? So between 2013, when I joined, this is what the practice looked like right before I came on board. My mother-in-law was the office manager, as so many partners get into business together, right? I joined in 2014, and being the incredible business professional that I am, I was able to help grow this practice by a whopping $40,000 while adding an additional 5 members to the team, which stripped all the profit out of the business. And it's because we did the right thing at the wrong time. Adding another set of services and adding another location is very much a growth or a scale business thing. You don't do that when you're in startup mode. Because we were in a fee-for-service business, all of a sudden that second location was underutilized, and it became an anchor to us. And there was nothing we could do about that other than send our staff up there to pay attention to try to garner more patients in that location. The neurofeedback services were highly unutilized, no matter how much fun we thought they were and how transformational they were for each of us. So what was the solution? Well, at the very beginning of 2017, we looked for coaches because we knew that we couldn't do this by ourselves, and we knew that somebody had an answer here. And we also knew that that direct correlation between how we were able to run our business was going to allow us to transform the most lives as possible. So our answers here, the solutions were get coaching, establish a new business model, and hire a more experienced team. And those solutions came directly from us working with Freedom Practice Coaching, where I am now the COO of that business. We were stuck in what I like to now call the messy middle. So the messy middle is this area that you can't break out of, right? Because you see your profit, and if you look, revenue is the blue line, team members is the red line, which also represents other expenses as well, and then the black line at the bottom is your profit. So we get tricked into believing over time that this profit curve is just gonna keep going up, right? So then we say, listen, we wanna pull back a little bit and have less time on our plate. So we do that at the expense of bringing on more team members, and this ball starts compounding down the road, and we don't realize it until later that actually our profit flips. When you're stuck in the messy middle, before you're able to move into growth mode, if you've done the wrong things, this is what happens to the business. And all we hear over and over and over again is I'm working harder than I was before. I am less entertained by my business. I now can only think about the fires in my business when I should be present with my patients. And that's being stuck in the messy middle. So many practices get stuck in the messy middle because they don't have somebody with a perspective to see where they are and show them what they should do at the right time for their business. So what to avoid in startup mode? Chasing growth without understanding unit economics. Unit economics is the programs we talked about, right? Hard costs, profit built into those things. If you don't understand your data and your numbers, do not start chasing growth. And do not add more services in a second location before determining a solid business model at the beginning. You don't need scale in startup mode, you need stability, right? You are reactive right now. So all you should be chasing is stability, not scale. You need to also start thinking about, instead of chasing more revenue, start chasing profit, right? Not complexity. And that's the lesson to take away for startup mode. So this is Joe DeLamielleure. Joe DeLamielleure is a Hall of Fame NFL football player. He blocked for O.J. Simpson for the Buffalo Bills, and he's an incredible human. And I met Joe DeLamielleure in 2016, and we decided to do a study on former NFL players. And Joe and I became really good friends because in a matter of about 5 or 6 sessions, Joe went from sleeping 3 hours a night for the past 10 years to sleeping 7 hours a night. And that one piece was the lead domino that changed his entire life. This was a really cool study, and there are a few interesting findings for this. Finding number 1, we did QEEGs on 80 former NFL players. We did a couple pilot studies with a couple of these players, Joe being one of them, and they started talking to the other guys. We ended up with only 13 players going through the full treatment. The reason is, all of their lawyers said, if you fix your brain right now, you won't get paid out by the NFL in the concussion lawsuit. Guess who didn't get paid out by the NFL in the concussion lawsuit? Any of those players, but their lawyers did. 13 guys went through, 12 of them had absolutely incredible results. And what was so interesting with this, you can see we only accepted people who actually had a spouse because we wanted to have a different perspective. When you're in cognitive decline, you don't have an appropriate perspective. You are functioning in your normal, right? And your normal is chaos. So if you look at this, the players are actually the blue line and the spouses are the red line. And on session number 1, this is symptom severity. So we looked at this across 10 different symptoms. We looked at sleep, we looked at anger, we looked at sadness, we looked at pain, and the average across all of those different symptoms for the players on session 1, the severity level was 3 out of 10. Their spouses, the severity level was 7 out of 10. As we started going through the sessions, what you can see is the spouses said, wow, these symptoms are getting incredibly better or less severe. But for the players, they were getting more severe. Why? Because they had perception. They could actually see the reality now, where they had hidden from that for so long. The trauma had locked in their brain this new normal. So we get to about session 5, and all of a sudden now they were matched. And the spouses and the players could have a conversation on the same wavelength for the first time in years. And then those severity symptoms dropped down together. It was absolutely amazing. And I think this is a really interesting corollary to business. Because as entrepreneurs, right, as business owners, we normalize the chaos and we call it entrepreneurship. We sit there and say, well, I'm just busy all the time, and this is crazy, and this is entrepreneurship, and this is how it's supposed to be. And you're just normalizing chaos. It was no different from the NFL players than it is for you as a business owner. But an expert or somebody with a different perspective can easily look at your situation in the same way that you can look at your patient's situation and understand that they are not living in the reality that you know, right? In many cases, you know what their life is going to look like after they work with you far better than they do. Most people actually underpredict where they're going to get to in a treatment outcome. And so it is for you to be that guide, to show them where they can achieve afterwards. So when you move into the growth phase of your business, you'll know that you're there when you're saying yes to these questions. Do you still make most of the key decisions yourself, even though you already have a team? Is growth happening, but your workload is actually not decreasing? And do you feel like more revenue is not necessarily changing into more freedom or profit? If you're nodding your head and saying yes to these, you're probably in growth mode. So what's the main focus here, right? We don't stop acquiring patients. We don't stop looking at our economics, our unit economics of our programs or our memberships, right? And we're not even here if we're still in a fee-for-service mode. But now we have to start paying attention to other things, just as feverishly as we did to acquiring customers in the first place. And these will feel very weird. Now all of a sudden you have to start thinking about hiring. You have to start thinking about management. You have to think about tracking data, right? And really understanding not just the data of your patients, but the key performance indicators of your business. What are my close rates coming in from my discovery calls? What is my net promoter score on the customer satisfaction on the back end? And how does that tell me how to run my business and what I should be changing, right? Hiring is an absolute key in this. And many business owners completely overlook this because in the beginning in startup mode, you had to hire generalists. One, that was all you could afford, right? You could only afford generalists and they had to wear multiple different hats. But two, you may not know how to hire specialists. But specialists, just for simplicity's sake, are way better than you at the job that they are being hired for, and they don't need micromanagement, and usually cost a whole lot more. And that's very scary, right? Because now all of a sudden in your business, you have somebody that is better than you at doing that job, and you're paying them a lot of money. And that is the only way to actually go through growth mode and move into scale. Because if you have a bunch of generalists, and you may think, well, I have these generalists because I need redundancy in my business. That's not actually a way to grow and scale your business. That is a way to stay stuck and stay small. So the biggest mistake here is that you don't ever change your thinking between the patient is the most important to the team is most important. Let your team at this point take care of the patients. You need to take care of the team. And you need to get really good at hiring and really good at management and really good at empowering and supporting your team if you're going to move through growth mode. It is the single biggest and hardest shift that I see everybody making when they're moving through startup and into growth mode. I think it's much harder than acquiring your first patient in the first place because your first patient that you acquire is through passion, right? You're running on a fuel that is passion. They can see that in your eyes and they trust you and move forward. And then we get into hiring and management, and it feels like a completely different thing. The other biggest mistake here is you still are acting like a founder. So you have ideas, lots of them, and that's great. We all have ideas, but ideas are distracting for your team. Your team is there to execute on what you've already done well. You found product market fit. You're trying to scale that to treat more people. You don't need to be an idea generator that is constantly coming up with new things. You need to be taking action on what you already do really well, and you need to empower your team to do that. There's a huge difference between the visionary founder, who is the idea generator that was super effective in startup mode, and the CEO who is there to hire and manage and empower their team to have laser focus on transforming lives. If your business slows when you step away, you don't own a business yet. You have a job. I think that's a really important thing to remember. So let's jump back into what happened in 2017. We joined Freedom Practice Coaching. They helped us understand that these 3,000 patients that we had that were coming once a year, we needed to change them into a membership. And so we did. And overnight, we went from $90,000 a month from 3 years to that $130,000 a month. Overnight, we went from $130,000 to $180,000 just from switching to a membership. And now all of a sudden it was recurring revenue and we didn't have to think about when the person was coming in next. By the end of the year of 2017, we had made it to 220 because now all new patients were coming in through programs. And this is where we really started spreading our wings with brain health. So it wasn't just former NFL players anymore or veterans with traumatic brain injuries. It was now people with generalized cognitive decline. It was now individuals with mild cognitive impairment. We had the janky spreadsheets before it was cool to have janky spreadsheets. And they were all over the place. And it took us all of this time to get all this together, but we were dedicated. And we have an incredible team at this point. But we had more symptoms because you do at every single different stage of your business. And at this time, we realized that our EMR sucked, right? Serbo wasn't out there at that time. So we didn't have an option of having Serbo. We were barely collecting data because it was on all these spreadsheets and all these PDFs all over the place. And our new patients were only coming for referrals. So what did we have to do? We had to shift our mindset yet again. We learned paid acquisition. Paid acquisition is just marketing, right? Ad dollars out, patients coming in, and it's a completely different game when you start doing that and realize that you can reliably bring in a certain number of patients every single month. We rebuilt our entire technology stack because we had to if we were going to scale. And then we built data and testing into every single program. So if somebody got labs or a QEG at the beginning, they were getting labs and QEG in the middle and labs and QEG at the end. And we did this for every single person so that we would get the data as they went through these programs. And this became incredibly valuable over time. Here's what our org chart looked like. And as you can see, over here, we started building this brain health whole practice, right? So we had the practitioners who were doing hormone replacement therapy, functional medicine, and then we also had a neurofeedback therapist that we hired to start building out our multimodal team. But growth without systems isn't growth, guys. It's just chaos wearing a smile. So systems become extremely important as you start moving from growth into scaling stage. So at the beginning of 2018, I was walking into a conference at Mindshare. Actually, I'm sure many of you have been to the Mindshare conference. And my phone rings, and it was an unknown number. And those were the days where, my phone rings, I think, 10 or 20 times a day now with unknown numbers. But back then, you used to answer unknown numbers because they were likely important. And this one was important. It was Dr. Dale Bredesen calling me, cold call out of the blue. And he said, Seth, I've heard from multiple different people that you guys are involved in cognitive decline. And I am putting together a study of 100 patients. I'm trying to find 100 cases that have seen cognitive decline reversal. And your name came up. I saw your website. It's clear that you do this. By any chance, do you have any cases that you can contribute to this study? And I said, yes, I have 58. He said, no, sorry. So you may not understand. I really need solid data with these cases. I've got to have pre and post of objective data, not just anecdotes, not just stories. How many of those do you have? And I said, I have 58. He said, what? I must be, like, how do you have 58 of these cases? And I said, because I've treated, he said, then he was like, well, how many people have you treated? I said, we've treated 58. And he said, how do you have pre and post data on everybody? And I said, it's because it's built into our underlying business model. It's how we do business. And he was flabbergasted. And I said, Dr. Bredesen, are you meaning to tell me that you're talking to people who have treated way more people than they have data on? He said, this is really rare, Seth. No one's tracking at this level. My mind was absolutely blown. We sent in those 58 cases. There was obviously a lot of practitioners on this list. They used 7 of them, which was great, and we got to be published in this paper of the Alzheimer's disease and Parkinsonism, reversal of cognitive decline, 100 patients, and this was an absolutely pivotal moment.
So are you saying out of those 100 patients, 58 were yours?
We submitted 58. They used 7 of them, but they wanted to use cases across the board, and it was pretty amazing, that moment. So what came out of this was some really cool things, right? We were starting to move into scale mode, and we were able to use this paper as credibility in our area. We had to partner with a couple hotels because people were now flying in because they wanted to stay and do treatment with us. All of a sudden, we became this incredible organization, and we started thinking about scaling. So ask yourself these questions to see if you're in scale mode. Does your business grow without your direct involvement or patient care? My father-in-law at this point was going down to Florida for 4 or 5 months out of the year and popping on Zoom a couple times a week just to check in. Do you have a leadership team that can drive growth without you? Not just run the day-to-day, but actually run strategy and drive growth. And if you started thinking about exit strategies, partnerships, or even expansion, And if you're answering yes to most of these, then you're probably in scale mode. The main focus here is not just hiring and management, it's actually building a leadership team. Having a team that can run the business completely without you. Tracking that business through data, just like you would with your patients and moving their health journey towards the outcome that they want to see, you need to be doing the same thing with your data and your business, right? So having a KPI dashboard or even OKRs, which is objectives and key results, that's how you plan the growth of your business, where KPIs are planning the health of your business. You've got to be precise about these metrics and not just track the ones that you want to track. You need to track metrics across clinical operations, patient satisfaction, your marketing funnels, and everything. And then at this point, you really need to focus on EBITDA, right? This is net profit with everything backed into it. And EBITDA becomes that metric that is the most important, EBITDA and lifetime value, because you want to see how long those patients are staying with you and how many times they come back, and also where that profit lies as you're scaling your business. But the biggest mistake that I see founders make at this point is that they become the bottleneck. They have trouble letting go. Letting go can be one of the hardest things that you ever do. But in this case, founders become the bottleneck as they move through that. Distractions can pull energy away because you feel unstoppable at this point. You've just grown a practice to a certain point, and now all of a sudden you try to go get military contracts and you try to go have meetings with the NFL health and safety. That's a great story. I got thrown out of the New York offices by telling the NFL that they had a concussion problem. Don't do that. And we were distracted all over where we should have just been focused on scale. So a little story there, right? Now we're up to 18 people. We've moved all the way from originally when I started at $90,000 to $130 to $220. Now we're doing $350,000 a month. We have 1,800 people in memberships that's providing the recurring revenue, paying for all of the costs of our operations and our team. 30 new patients are coming in per month. I'm now the COO of this. And now we have the symptoms of we have to tell the world, right? Where we should be focusing on actually just continuing to scale that. But the owner was looking for an out. And when I started, my father-in-law said, I do want an exit in this. And I could start seeing that in him. And we had an amazing opportunity where one of the practitioners that we had hired saw the momentum in the practice and wanted to purchase that practice. This is what our org chart looked like at scale. And it was a beautiful, really fun time to be in this business. We were seeing 15, 20 new patients in cognitive decline every single month and doing incredible work. And this is what happened when we broke through the messy middle, right? If you remember, the chart kind of stopped at 2016, and that was when we got the expert coaching, and it allowed us to flip that profit curve back up as we grew in scale because we were paying attention to that as the primary metric. So if the business still needs you every single day, guys, it is a business. Or it is a job with a fancy title, not really a business, right? And remember, there's a direct correlation to how well your business is functioning and how many patient lives you can transform. So that's my father-in-law, Dr. Ronnie Brown, and my mother-in-law, Susan. And these are my children. This is Henley. This was taken 2 years ago, so Henley will be 3 in August, and that's Atlas, the one without any arms. He has arms, I just don't know where they are in that picture. And Atlas will be 8 on July 4th. And this was a day where we were celebrating my in-laws' 50th wedding anniversary. And it was a beautiful day, and that night, over a glass of wine, we were reminiscing. And my father-in-law sat down and told my wife and I, he said, you know, I delivered 10,000 babies. I saved countless lives. I was known as the #1 OBGYN in the Charlotte region for 20 years. I established this great practice. We treated almost 11,000 people. But those couple years that we were really working together, those are the best years of my career. And we had this amazing moment. And it brought me back to a quote from The Office, the TV show. In the last episode, Andy, the character, has the camera on him, and he said, you know, I wish somebody could tell you when you're in the good old days before you leave them. Ronnie had an incredible exit, and it set him up for the rest of his life. It established the baseline that I needed to do what I do now, which is work with practitioners, help them build businesses, because I feel the biggest way I can impact the world of health and the transformation of people is directly through helping practitioners build sustainable businesses and understand how to work around that. So to recap this, guys, in startup, you've got to get profitable with the right underlying business model. In growth, pay to acquire customers, and then hire specialists who already have experience in the job that you are looking to hire for. And then in scale, you're expanding your business model, right? Maybe adding on memberships if you started with programs, or the other way around, and developing a leadership team to drive your business through data. And I just want you to remind you of this because I think you already know this. Your patients can't escape this sick care spiral alone, but neither can you. Neither can you. And if I have one piece of advice, it is understand where you are now in your business, and then find a guide you need to do next rather than just scrambling. So at Freedom Practice Coaching, we're building the business infrastructure for the post-sick care model. And we feel that that is the best thing that we can do to help in the transformation of health. And what we do all day, every day, is we help practitioners, whether they are in brand new businesses or startup or growth or scale mode, we help them identify where they are so that they can understand the next step. We eliminate the inefficiencies, and we turn revenue into actual profitability. Building scalable systems along the way so the business can run without you, because that's the true dream, is to see patients transformed while you get your sovereignty back as well. So for the next few minutes, what I would love for you all to do is actually understand where you are. I built the scalability assessment over the last 4 years in working with hundreds of practitioners to understand exactly what is critical about every business. So what you'll see when you pop into this after you put your name and email address is that there are about 60 questions. It should take about 10 minutes. There's 60 questions that are looked at over about 7 different domains. And these domains are all of the critical parts of your business where we want to see where you are functioning. And it's amazing to see this report afterwards, which is delivered by one of our senior advisors. We have a whole team that is fluent in the scalability assessment, and they'll actually deliver this through a personalized 1-hour session that is about a $1,500 value. I want to give that to everybody watching and everybody in this room for free today. But what this will do is it'll actually show you exactly where you are. It'll pinpoint whether you're in startup, scale, or growth mode, and it will show you where you're lopsided and what you need to do to catch up. So it will give you an exact plan of what you should do over the next 6 months to even out your wheel and then plan for that next stage, whatever that means for you. That could mean staying where you are, right? This isn't about scaling at all costs. This is about transformation for patients. And I feel through this and the work that we're doing with the trio of companies that we have, that I'm finally able to say that I kept my promise to my grandfather, Jack. And although I couldn't help him with his health issues, I am helping many, many, many more people for the work that I'm doing. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for your participation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Seth Conger, give me some microphone here. Hey. All right, so can you put me up? On? Oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, just stay up here for a sec. So we're going to leave this on. Can you leave the QR code up, actually, for the next, 5 minutes that was on before? So we're going to, in this room, you've been sitting for a long time. We're going to give you guys a few minutes, some snacks here. If you're at home, we're going to take 10 minutes now. And if you need to go to the bathroom, you can sit on the loo, and you could do the scalability assessment, while you're there doing it. You could do that as well here. But look, I was a practice management guy for a long time, and this is the coolest thing that I've seen in the industry, because ultimately, what it's really taken to scale business coaching and understanding where a practice is, it takes the answering of a quiz that has the understanding of what to do built into it. And I think when you go through these questions, you'll realize that Seth's put a lot of thought into this, and that ultimately this is one of the gifts that we wanted to give to every practice today, because ultimately we don't really care about delivering the brain health practice of tomorrow today, if we can only do it for 5 people at a time per county or whatever. There's a huge need out there. We have to scale. When I told you at the beginning that I think Seth is the right guy to take us there, hopefully you see why he is. So take the scalability assessment. Don't go anywhere, because right after the break, we're going to show you ViewMind. So we're going to actually show you how to understand what a truly functional assessment of a brain can look like. So we're going to get into that right after the break. We're also going to go through a little bit of the tech stack that we see emerging for delivering this kind of care. And then, at the end, I've got Dr. Uli Isalo, who's going to talk about acquiring patients for your practice as well, and new models that he's created to make it easy for any clinic to acquire patients. And the good news is you don't have to do any TikTok videos. So that's part of the plan. And then the other thing that I want to share is I've got a big announcement at the end that I'm going to hold you back for. So make sure that you stay to the end. So we'll start again in about 8 minutes. So in the meantime, if you're here, do some stretching. We got some snacks over here. Pablo's manning the snack bar over there. Get some fresh air, and we'll be back in here for 10 minutes. You don't want to miss ViewMind. Thanks again to Seth for knocking it out of the park.
James.
Wanted to share. Hello? Good? All right. Hey, everyone. Just wanted to share an update. So we do have some time scheduled later for everyone here to connect with Seth and with Uli, with Jonathan, with the Serbo team as you move along. You'll see the details just over there. So if you're going to the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual conference, they have their opening reception between 5 and 7 back at the hotel. And if you're not, we have a rooftop bar that we are going to be hosting some conversations. You want to connect to each other. So we'll be telling all the details about that moving forward. We are going to start the second half of this event in a second here. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is this awesome ViewMind technology. Now, if you're coming tonight, Tom, spoke about it a little bit, but if you're coming tonight, you can actually try it for yourself. So downstairs we'll have a headset, and you'll be able to do the functional brain assessment and see how your brain is doing. Now, let me see at home. How's it going with doing the scalability assessment? Did you get through it? Feel free to send us a question and put your questions into the Q&A, and we'll you can also fill that out. You'll see on the back of this big banner there are some QR codes, and the QR code for Freedom Practice Coaching goes to their scalability assessment, so you guys can check that out. All right. All right, so we're back on the Slido here. You can use, what were some aha moments that you got from those presentations? Especially Seth there. Look, I mean, I just feel that most people who are operating inside functional medicine, like this kind of conversation is not happening a lot, right? The conversation about the reality of hiring and participating. So if you are watching online, you're watching here, what are some aha moments that hit you? You can share a little bit about that, so you can think as Seth was going through some of those details. And we are going to move forward. All right, so in about 1 minute, I'm going to show the demo here of ViewMind. And, if you look at the way that the brain is assessed right now, one of the things you can say is that it's not particularly sophisticated. So who in here has done a MoCA score evaluation in your time, right? Most of you have done that. It's the Montreal assessment of, what is it, CA? Cognitive assessment. And essentially it's a score that is created to tell you the level of your cognition. And it's essentially a series of questions. So you can understand there's some issues built into the foundations of that, in that you're asking people who may or may not have cognitive decline questions, and then relying on that information to create a score. Ultimately, what we need in our world here is to really understand the brain function. And Seth talked about some of the stuff they did with the EEG, but ultimately there are some really, really sophisticated technologies arriving on the market now, as Tom alluded to a little bit earlier. And so what I want to do for you is play for you an overview of ViewMind. And as I said earlier, you'll be able to, if you're here in San Diego, you'll be able to try this out tonight. And if you are watching at home, you can get in touch with ViewMind. But Tom did an interview recently with Mark Edwards, who's the founder of ViewMind, and we're going to show that, and you're going to see exactly how it works, what it is, what kind of information is gathering, and that way. All right, so some insights coming in, functional MRI, being married to the practice. I'm sure that makes sense for a lot of people. You can join the Slido here with this QR code. You can ask questions. We're getting into the third part of our session today, which is your tech stack. Ultimately, if we want to scale the brain health care of tomorrow, today, we're going to have a technology stack that allows that scale. So here's a little insight into ViewMind. Oops, I've gone through a little bit further.
Greetings, everyone. I am Tom Blue. I'm visited today by Mark Edwards, the co-founder and CEO of ViewMind, a technology that I have gotten myself extraordinarily excited about. And as it is, I believe, a thing that is going to unlock the world of cognitive performance improvement once and for all. And so it's Mark, I want to welcome you. We're going to try in about 10 minutes to unpack a really exciting technology so people can get a sense of it. And why don't you introduce yourself and take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thanks for the introduction and invitation to this session. My name is Mark Edwards. I'm the CEO, co-founder of ViewMind. I'm going to talk you through a few things. Firstly, an introduction to the company and the technology. Then going to explain a little bit about the product and then what we produce in terms of a report. So let's start off. Our mission is to be the highest precision technology for analyzing and assessing functional brain health based on ocular assessments, so assessments of eye movements. And just to explain, to start with the status quo. So today we have technology that is looking at the structural health of the brain using things like MRI and biomarkers to identify different proteins in the brain. These tests are generally invasive and expensive and are only done when somebody's already presenting evident symptoms of maybe neurodegeneration. Could be things like an MRI or PET scan or blood testing or a CSF lumbar puncture. Then on the functional side, so more how does the state of the brain manifest in terms of our cognitive function and the ability to recall information, so our memory, different kinds of memory that we have, our processing speed, reaction times, and our executive function, and also attention, how well we can focus on the task. This is something that has been a struggle to measure with any kind of sensitivity. The techniques that we've had have mostly been focused on impairment, and when somebody's already quite maybe at an advanced stage, using very crude methodologies such as pen and paper testing and technology versions, maybe on a computer or a tablet, of the same thing, essentially the same thing. What is more interesting, we believe, is to be able to, by getting a much more precise ability to measure the cognitive function, we can measure a healthy brain, and we can measure how that healthy brain is responding to different interventions. So obviously, the brain, functional brain health, is a reflection of many other pillars of health in our body. So vessel health, obviously cardiovascular, metabolic health, and hormones, exposure to toxins, exposure to viruses, all these kinds of things ultimately can manifest in impairments or alterations in functional brain health. So if we can measure this very precisely, repeatedly, with no learning effect, and be sensitive to small changes, then now we have an instrument, a tool that can characterize and measure these alterations as somebody's receiving an intervention for something. And so that's really what we see ViewMind being used for longitudinal measurement of alterations in functional brain health. So if we move on then to what is ViewMind? And the product, we call it ViewMind NeuroScan. We're scanning eye movements. And the way the process works is a patient puts on a headset. The instructions are explained by an assessor or evaluator who sits with the individual. They then have to perform a series of exercises just based on their eye movements and how they're responding. We digitize the eye movements. They're uploaded to the cloud and they're analyzed with our intelligent algorithms, and a report is then generated that is actionable. So to give you a little bit more background in terms of the science behind what we're doing, the eye, as I'm sure you're aware, is part anatomically of the brain. And so the eye is a very direct access point to what's going on in the brain, devoid of noise. What we do is we expose the eye to a visual stimulus. This activates different neural pathways in the brain. We have spent many years characterizing, actually our chief science officer spent 23 years working in this area to characterize and decrypt the eye movements and how they relate to different brain functions. And we can then interpret that data along with pupillometric data as well, and using our algorithms to give us a very precise characterization of the state of the brain. So we have a lot of publications. So it's based on a lot of science and work that we've done with different institutions such as the Mayo Clinic, Harvard Medical School, Columbia University Medical Center, Davos, and various, maybe 50 different institutions altogether. We have some regulatory approval. We are going through an FDA regulatory approval for another product. But we, based on the use of ViewMind for NeuroScan, we have an FDA registration that allows us to use it for longitudinal measurement. So this is a little bit about the background, and then in terms of publications, these are some of the journals where we've been published. There's about 84 publications in total, including some very high impact factor journals, such as Brain and Neurology and Alzheimer's Research Journal. So this is an example of a visual stimuli. So this particular task, which would be well known to a neuropsychologist, is called go, no, go. The stimulus presents a cross. The eyes have to focus on the cross. You can see just about make out a green dot, and there's a blue dot there as well. And they're both the fixation point of the left and the right eye. What happens is that the cross disappears, an arrow will appear, and depending on whether the arrow is pointing one way or the other, you have to move your eyes in that direction, with the added nuance that if the arrow is red rather than green, you have to do the opposite. So you're using an extra step, inhibitory processes, to inhibit the desire to go in the direction of the arrow, which is testing a different area of the brain. So I'll start playing. You can see over here, the eyes are moving very quickly, and the exercise advances as quickly as the eyes are moving through this exercise. And we're gathering a lot of data. Now, if we look at a standard test as to how the information is assimilated, a standard sort of behavioral assessment, and this is one of the reasons why it lacks sensitivity, it's trying to infer the complexity of the brain, which has 1,000 trillion connections, to a test that could have 100, maybe some thousands of permutations of response. And these are really essentially based on correct and incorrect responses that somebody's providing. In the case of ViewMind, we're looking in tens of milliseconds or less, all the eye movements, not just how somebody, the response that they're giving, but how they're actually solving a problem. Whereas in these traditional tests, that problem-solving process is disregarded. So we're looking at the efficiency of encoding, decoding, processing, planning, using different aspects of memory, making decisions. So we have billions of different permutations of data, and that gives us this very precise, sensitive measurement to be able to detect fine-grained changes that are going on. Just to explain a little bit more detail, you saw in the previous example where I showed you the stimulus, the arrow, and how the eyes were responding. I'm now going to show you in slow motion. So you can see how the eyes are moving, and then they're moving all the way there. In this case, they went the wrong way, then they went backwards, and so on. So we can get, this gives you a glimpse of these many different parameters that we're measuring, and some of the measurements we're making, how many fixations are occurring, the duration of those fixations, the speed of the eye movements, the acceleration, all sorts of different variables that have signal. This is the kind of report that we generate. So this report looks at the six different cognitive domains: executive function, processing speed, spatial perception, sustained attention, selective attention, and working memory. And over time, as we build a larger database of normative controls, we're going to be able to look at cognitive brain age and compare people with age and gender matched controls. But for now, the big focus is really about longitudinal measurement. This person had a particularly high score. It was a very high performing CXO, very fit individual. And you can see here very, very high scores, and one which was just sort of more in the middle there, but it was still good. So we could use this to take a baseline of an individual. They could have interventions, and we could periodically see what progress they're making. This shows you a longitudinal report. So it's a similar kind of thing that I just showed you, but now we have multiple data points. So we've in fact got 4 data points here. This is an overall assessment. We can see the individual's progress compared to their baseline. And then finally, we have a QR code. This is a short introduction to the ViewMind technology. I'd encourage you to go to this QR code, and that will give you a really good introduction. Thank you.
Mark, what a terrific job you did unpacking an awful lot of information in a short time. So for folks listening, I hope you can kind of, the revelation here is that for the first time ever, we have an ultra high resolution way of quantifying cognition across 6 different domains, a way of testing natural products, natural product protocols, other interventions for cognitive improvement, and can work with patients kind of across the entire continuum of cognitive performance, all the way to peak performance, as you saw with that executive. So to me, this is just a big, big deal. I'm in love with the technology, and I'm glad we were able to unpack it in such a concise time frame. Well done.
All right, there we go. So yeah, let's take a little look. If you're watching that at home, or if you're here now, what do you think about that? Love to hear what your thoughts are about ViewMind. You can participate in the Slido here from at home, or if you're in here, to share a little bit about what you think about that. Ultimately, look, I want to think that the amount of data that we're talking about here is extremely overwhelming. You can see how much data comes from that, right? And yet, what we're talking about here today is having a system, having a technology stack that can deal with all of that data and that can score it appropriately and combine those scores into useful ways so that actually this data situation is manageable. And not just manageable, but optimized. Because there are going to be endless numbers of different ways that you could understand the brain function, what's driving the brain pathology along the way. All right, interesting, pretty cool, impressive. What does it cost? How much does it cost? You can get into all those details there. I know they have a situation where you pay on a per patient basis, and that patient can then come back as many times as they want to use it. I think that's one of the ways that they price it. And so you can see that in a longitudinal membership where you're charging, X dollars per month up front, Dr. Burke in her clinic has this protection program where she's doing like $250 a month in the sort of phase where you're working intensely with the practitioner, and then a second phase when you get into maintenance, that's a lower cost. You can see how, imagine if you're getting this test every quarter, coming in, getting this data, seeing how you're doing. This is a very data-rich, a very transformative experience. This is literally delivering the brain health care of tomorrow today, and the TruNeura platform can be there to put it all together. Game changer. How do I start using it? Hey, you can get in touch with ViewMind. You can check them out here. If you're in the room, you can use this QR code. They did put a QR code there before. I'll put it back up where you can get in touch and check it out. We have a couple of people here tonight. You're going to be able to test it out. You're going to be able to see your own score. We'll have it downstairs in a nice quiet spot so that you can concentrate and get your scan done. What do you think, Abhi? Pretty cool. Everyone seems to like it. All right. I want to just talk about one more thing here. So ultimately, there are a lot of cool things that people are already using that generate a lot of data in this brain space. And I want to give an example here, which is that ultimately, that there's already tests that people are using. So I want to say thank you to the team from Intellex DNA. So Intellex DNA told all of their people about this today, and if you're watching, maybe you came from Intellex DNA, welcome. I first met Sharon in 2017. She's been doing her thing a long time, and I think that Intellex DNA is doing the most interesting things related to genomics and cognitive decline. They use the Intellex DNA in the trial that's going on now with the Avanthia trial that Dr. Burke is part of. And look, it's a pretty clear information here that dementia has many contributing factors. You can see all these: inflammatory, amyloid clearance, growth factors, estrogen and hormones, mitochondrial issues, toxin, vascular dementia, nutrient transport and needs, neurodegenerative. All of these things are happening. Each of these categories has highly significant gene variants that contribute to cognitive decline independent of ApoE. Dr. Sandy Kapoor's in the house. I know he's a big user of it over there and speaks on behalf of Intellex DNA. Well, the key is to identify contributing factors and address those that are modifiable. So we're super excited that we're going to be partnering with Intellex DNA. It's going to be the first genetic test that we're going to integrate into TruNeura so that all of that data can come in, it can be scored. It will be a pared down version because there is a lot of data in that test, and I think that the vast majority of clinicians could get lost in it. And so ultimately, we're working with Sharon and Kristine, who have been using this test a lot, to work out how do we get the most important information, so that how do we get that same genetic snapshot in here. So again, if you didn't see it earlier, we'll just come back to it so that you can see it. The whole point of this is to have a system that allows you to organize all of your data, whether it's coming from genetics, whether it's coming from labs, whether it's coming to functional labs. One of the things that Kristine has done in the TruNeura Mastermind, we've had questions about different labs, because if you show up at IFM this weekend and you walk the hall, you'll see that there's 50 different lab companies with different kinds of labs. And one of the things that Kristine was involved with a few years ago was a task force put on by IFM to understand, what are these labs actually doing, right? What is the methodology? Is it scientifically rigorous? And so you'll see that inside TruNeura, we have only the most scientifically rigorous tests, and we're adding, things along the way. But you need to find out, okay, what test are we going to use to understand, the chemical toxins in the body, whether there's biotoxin illness. So that a lot of the work has been done so that you don't have to fight through the marketing and fight through the BS to find the right stuff. So thank you, Intellex DNA. Thank you very much for your support. All right, now I want to talk about building the technology foundation. Ultimately, as I said at the beginning, when I first started the Functional Forum, I would go around and sort of find out who's using what EHR. And ultimately, the first people that I spoke to were people like Dr. Robin Berzin, who was very tech savvy, and Chris Kresser, who were quite, tech savvy at that point. And then I ended up going out to California, and there was a whole group of practitioners in the East Bay that had all decided to use MDHQ at the same time, because they knew that they wanted to work together to really learn the software, understand the software and how it works. And so that has become Serbo. And there are 3,000 clinics across the country that are using Serbo. We at Freedom Practice Coaching have supported that journey to support Serbo and to partner with Serbo. But actually, it kind of sells itself. In the group, some new practitioner comes and say, what EHR do you use? We don't really have to say anything because the practitioners talk about it themselves. So just to share a little bit about what they're up to and what Serbo does, please welcome their CEO, Jonathan Dunn.
All right, thank you, James. All right, good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity for us to speak with you all and to help to partner with everyone in this event. Here in person and everyone online just with the live stream. Today's topic is really around cognitive decline. I just want to share a quick story of kind of my experience with that, and that comes from my grandmother. And I grew up on my grandmother's side. Anytime you found me, you can see me next to following my grandmother. And then as she got older in life, she wasn't able to participate in some of those key events in my life, like attending my wedding and going to visit my first house that I was able to buy, and just those moments growing up where you always thought that that person who was important to you be there, but it was robbed because of the cognitive decline that she experienced. And sitting here today and over the course of my time here at Cerbo and seeing the amazing things that our providers are doing to change healthcare for the better, it's kind of reignited this passion in me of what we do every day at Cerbo, of being a technology provider, where it's just one piece of what all of you are doing. And going off of what Seth was mentioning earlier, I think another type of analogy is thinking about you surrounding yourself with the best team and the resources for you to be successful, which is that core mission of changing lives for the better. And so Cerbo is one piece of that. We're just one piece. It's an important piece, but there's a lot of things in that. And something I wanted to make sure I left you all with is the idea of coaching, and that sometimes we think we know all the answers. All of you are likely very entrepreneurial in spirit and feel like you've gotten this far by yourself, figured it out. You've gone out on your own, gone against the mainstream and doing the right thing. While all that's very true, it takes a team. And that's what Seth was really speaking to a lot. And I think it can kind of go over your head when you think about what you're trying to do and all the many things that are on your plate and that you're trying to juggle, that without that piece, without a coach that's helping you along the way, every step of this path that you decided to go down, and surrounding yourself with a team, you're gonna make it harder for yourself. And another analogy is just throw out, and this will be my last one, is if you think, I'm a sports guy, so if you think about the #1 draft pick that's coming out the NFL, likely gonna be a quarterback. A lot of times they end up going to the worst team, and you don't really get to see them realize their full potential because they're not surrounded by the resources, by the systems, by the coaches that are helping them to be successful. And so that's just another way I want to leave y'all with. And why is that important to me? Because my company depends on you to be successful. At the end of the day, if you're not out there scaling a great business, impacting lives, growing your business, then Cerbo ourselves can't really be our potential to really spread out and change the lives that you're trying to do and help you along that path. A lot of our customers come in as one solo clinic and then end up growing over time. And sometimes people are coming over from another EHR, and we're able to migrate them over and really put a system and a tool that is purpose-built for this type of industry. So we're gonna go through some of the highlights of why we're the best solution, in my view, for this particular space. Are there any Cerbo users here in the crowd today? We got a couple. All right, thank you for being here and thank you for being a customer. And we'll go through this. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit just about enhancing your practice with the modern EHR. I'm going to kind of keep this high level. We have a great sales team who are here with us today. They're also going to be at the IFM conference, so feel free to come by if you have any additional questions this afternoon, or if you are attending IFM, to stop by our booth at the conference. A little bit about our story. We started 12 years ago, specifically in this space. As James mentioned, there were some providers in the Bay Area that really launched us off into the integrative functional medicine space, really around, in this space, I think Kat Toops was one of the early adopters. Many of you may know her. And what makes us really unique for this space, one, that we were built for integrative functional medicine, cash-based, so programs, membership-based, but we're a configurable system. If you've come from one of the other hospital-grade systems, we're nothing like that. We allow you to really create workflows that are purpose-built for your practice and how you want to practice medicine. We integrate with a lot of the labs. I think James mentioned some of the labs that if you're going to the IFM conference, you'll see them. Most of them we do integrate in, either bidirectional or unidirectionally, keeping everything in the system so you don't have to jump out and go between different platforms when it comes to reviewing labs. And I think we're time-tested proven. We're always continuing to innovate and make sure that we're staying on top of what's happening in our space, and we're taking feedback from our customers to make sure that the next person who's looking for an EHR in our space uses Cerbo. Stock form. So we do have a partnership with Freedom Practice Coaching. I believe these may not be all of those, but we do have some stock forms that if you are a member and using the Freedom Practice Coaching program, that we have some stock forms that come out the box, so you don't have to recreate those. And we partnered with Freedom Practice Coaching on creating those, so those are a couple of those there. And if you're also trying to create your own forms and questionnaires, we have a form builder that allows to empower each of our providers to create those own forms as needed. And if there's something that's complex, reach out to our team and we can help guide you through what that process looks like. If there's something outside of our stock form builder that's a little bit more complicated that you may need. We do not. today. So I'll just leave it at that. But that is something that we have been looking into kind of with the whole livid matrix, timeline and matrix on that. So to be determined on that, ... All right, so the three things that we do are, in my view, electronic health records, practice management, and patient portal. So we're gonna jump through those really quick. And once again, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to the team. On the practice management side of things, that's your schedule, your calendar, setting up appointments, appointment reminders going out to your patients ahead of them coming back to their appointment to make sure that they're gonna be able to show you. Yes, please.
They fill out their sign-up sheets ahead of time?
Absolutely. So we'll talk about that when we go to the patient portal to see what all that the patients can do ahead of time, from intake, payments, all of that onto our patient portal. But on the practice management side, this is where your lab results will come in, any type of appointment request will come in, and either you can manage this yourself, or as if you're scaling your team and you have a front office manager or someone else who's working on that, they will spend a lot of their time managing the schedule of the practice and all the providers there. We could also have on our calendars resources. So if you have an IV room or anything of that, we can help you set up those calendars as well so that you can schedule those resources and make sure that you're getting full utilization out of them. Into the patient's charts, one of the key things that our providers really love about this is you can see a lot of information on one screen. So you can see your encounter notes, you can see admin notes, which are more internal to the practice as your staff may be putting things notes about particular patients. You see patient vitals on the bottom right in the yellow are billing blocks. That's where you can have all your invoice information, and you can see all of that there. A couple of things here in the middle. You see your medications block, which is in the red. We do support IVs and pellet therapy, which we have shown on here as an example. Then your documents block on the bottom. So if there's any type of forms that you've shared with them, or if you're any type of handouts that you've shared with your patients, you can view all that here as well. All right, going into encounter notes, this is where the bread and the butter really gets together here, this is where you can put all of your SOAP notes and all your documentations when you're having an encounter with the patient. We have this, what I think is a pretty slick, two things to help save you time. One are chart parts, to where you can type in and create these pre-populated fields that automatically pop up, and they can pull in from information that's in different parts of that patient's chart, which are in our database, to pre-populate that so you're not starting from a blank chart. And you can create an infinite number of those and customize them and configure them to whatever is the best workflow for your practice. Another item that we have here to really help with your time, to help save you time, are suggested actions, and that's going to be this red box up here. And it's similar, you activate it similarly to a chart part where you put in the certain text for that particular suggested action, and it puts those commonly used items in here, and what you can select from there are any assessments, any plans, any lab orders. If you want to add charges from there, instead of having to go jump around to different parts of the system and screen to add that, if it's a common type of condition that you treat, you can create that there, and it just really saves you a lot of time for yourself and your staff as you're creating those systems in place for people to practice and follow. All right, patient portals. Your question as far as people can fill out questionnaires. So those forms that we showed earlier that you can also create yourself using the form builder can be viewed in the patient portal. So once again, this is what it looks like when the patient logs in to their patient portal that they'll get set up. This is where they'll be able to set up appointments. This is where they'll be able to communicate via secure messaging to the clinic, as well as they'll fill out anything as far as questionnaires, labs and documents, medication histories. They can check on supplements. They can check on any prescriptions, and pharmacies and billing from there. You can configure this. This is a lot for some practices, so if you don't want to have that many options available for your patients to see, we can work with you on configuring this down to get it as streamlined or as robust as you need for your particular clinic. And it can grow with you over time. So if you want to have additional things added here, we can work with that. I did mention documentation, so if there's any handouts that you provided to them, they can log into their patient portal and view those. Any invoice history, so if there's questions about billing or whatnot, they can log into one centralized spot and see all that information.
I'm sorry. I do a lot of that with Signify Health for annual in-home health assessments. A lot of the seniors don't know how to get into their health portals. Is this easy for seniors, or is this complex?
I'm not sure how senior friendly it is. That is a challenge, I think, just when it comes to technology in general. We do try to make it as simple as we can, but there may be some populations, if you're not as tech savvy, that there may be some challenges. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head on how we can make that even easier along the way. But that is a concern. I could understand that being an issue. Yes.
So, we can reference
Yeah, absolutely.
because I'm a Circle user. We actually, I have to make a little video
Yeah, so videos for patients. Yeah. Yeah, and can you say it one more time, just make sure I'm repeating it correct?
We made the little video.
You made the video.
Newly registered patients navigate patient portals, just very basic. You go here to do
Got it.
this, you go there to do that. And, you know, and we can obviously, we're also using a PBM app from Newly, so we can actually see if they actually push the video or not.
Oh, got it.
It helps patients to get them.
Yeah, and just to repeat that so the people online can hear, the question was about elderly patients who may have trouble navigating the patient portal, and someone who's a Serbo user, they've created a step-by-step video once people register to kind of show them how to access and navigate the portal, which has been helpful with reducing the number of questions.
But it would have been great if part of the Servo platform had that video. If you guys had done.
Hey guys, I appreciate there's hundreds of people watching online, and it's very hard for them to participate. So I think we can have this conversation,
Sure.
afterwards and do that. So
Yes.
I just want to make
appreciate
sure
that,
that
James.
we're doing
Yeah,
that. Thank you.
and I'll wrap up here. Appreciate James keeping me on track. Here's some customer reviews, and I'm just going to wrap up here really quickly. And once again, you can feel free to visit us at booth 619 at the IFM conference. And if you have any questions, our team here tonight will be here to answer, or you can see you at the conference.
Awesome, thanks, Jonathan. Didn't mean to cut you off. I just know that we have a lot of people watching online, and I probably should have just come across with the mic. But Regina, thanks very much for your innovation. That's what it takes to work it out. And you spoke to a little bit there about with Uli, how can you learn what the people have actually done? It's actually kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier. Have they gone to bed early and slept 8 hours? Have they watched the video? You need this kind of data all the way through. And I want to show a big thank you to Jonathan and to the Serbo team. And they're going to be here tonight as well, and they're going to be here this weekend at IFM, and we're really grateful to be in partnership with them. We are working on the integration between Serbo and TruNeuro. One of the things that Serbo is really cool about what they do is, they have a pretty robust API, and so there are actually other organizations out there that can help you get your Serbo connected to pretty much everything that you would like, and that's a part of having a technology stack and an ecosystem. Because they've been around this long, there's already resources, connections made to some of those. So our hope is very, very soon, maybe by the next time that this big arch is unfurled at the Integrated Medicine for Mental Health Conference back here in San Diego in September, that the full technology integration will be available and ready to go. And one other thing I would say is that if you are considering adding a new brain health niche inside your practice, and maybe you've been scared to change your EHR because it's a significant change, maybe starting a new program is a moment to do that with a new part of your business, and then maybe you recognize that it works a lot better than what you're doing right now, and then you've sort of defrayed the changing costs, because we all know that changing your EHR is time-consuming and annoying. Seth talked about it earlier. All right, Anthony, come on up here for a sec. I just wanted to continue the conversation here for a sec. Anthony has been chatting with, he's our brain health clinic specialist at TruNeura, and has spoken to hundreds of practitioners over the last little while. And Anthony, I just wanted to ask you, from your experience of speaking to practitioners, what are the main kinds of clinical issues that you're seeing that practitioners coming along are interested in solving?
Yeah, so the actual, the work that Dr. Burke is doing on the Alzheimer's dementia space, that's actually our smallest market that we have. So in general, practitioners are interested in things like mental health. They're interested in things like mild and moderate cognitive decline. But we also have the biggest group of practitioners. They want to launch some kind of brain focus in their practice, but they're also asking, can this work for my cardiovascular patients? Can this work for my autoimmune patients? And the answer is, it's all the same root causes, right? And the way the platform is designed, it's designed to track and score the root causes. So in a very short amount of time, you as a practitioner can go in, if you've got 6, 10 patients that day, you can go in and look at the overview of each patient and say, what am I looking at with my caseload today? Okay, I see this patient has more very high metabolic inflammation, doesn't seem to have a lot of chemical toxins, and you can see the individual markers in one simple view.
Tell us a little bit about the stage of practitioners, because we mentioned the second practitioner. What are you seeing in terms of, like, is it a lot of practitioners looking to grow and add a new person? Is it people in startup? What are you seeing there?
So it's interesting. We're seeing, like what Seth was talking about earlier, all three phases. We're seeing the startup mode, we're seeing the growth mode, and we're seeing the scale mode. Those in the startup mode, what I'm hearing a lot of is, you know, I want to launch this membership thing in 3 months, and then when you kind of get deeper into the questions, it's like, how long has it been 3 months? Oh, well, it's been 3 months for 6 months. So, so what we've done is, you know, outside of being a software platform, we also have education that's built in because, you know, how to launch a brain health membership in 60 days is a part of the platform, so you can get education from best practices in the industry from people like Seth, James, Tom Blue, some of the people you've heard on this stage. And then in the growth mode, what we're starting to see is, you know, the practitioner has maxed out the amount of time that they can spend with patients, and they're having that second practitioner problem. So this is where the functionality of having the AI built in that gives the guardrails, the recommendations, you know, that practitioner can very quickly have that second practitioner has their own login, and we can see all of their patients under one level. So the main practitioner in the practice, the owner, can go in and look at the cases very quickly and say, hey, the AI has recommended this. What did you recommend for the patients? Have you considered this? So it's looking at an accelerated learning. And then to kind of finish the loop, and those are in the scaling, you know, when you're really trying to build something unique and trying to build something special, you have to think, what can I do that's different? A lot of the practices that are in scale mode, they already have a membership, they already have a program. And they're thinking of, what ways can I bring more value? What ways can I separate what we're doing from what the other practices are doing? And this becomes a very key component.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to just say one thing that I've learned from working with Seth is that what I see is that the majority of functional medicine doctors, if you ask them what their like dream team looks like, their goal isn't always necessarily to be the CEO. Their goal is actually more often than not to be the director of clinical operations, right? Overseeing the other doctors and focusing in on empowering them to get great outcomes, but not being in all the boring accounting meetings. And, you know, I think when you're a business owner, you think that the journey is then to be the CEO and run the whole show, but that's been really interesting because in this mastermind, there's only clinics that are doing over $1 million plus, and you see that if you start with the end in mind, which is I want to be basically the head clinician and mentoring these other clinicians, seeing my own patients and being in the mix, that is possible, but you've got to start with the end in mind in that journey. Anything else that you want to share about speaking to 100 practitioners in this space already and what you've learned?
Yeah, so what I've seen is we've had a lot of practitioners come in, and they're kind of like hodgepodging their AI together, and they're hodgepodging like spreadsheets for the data, and they're spending a lot of time on it and not getting the results that they want. It's like the first time you connect with ChatGPT, it's like, no, you're not really telling me what I want to know. So the thing to think about with how this approach to AI is just radically different from what's out there is, you know, we are actually training this AI model on actual real patient cases, on what is really working in functional medicine, and from a wide range of practitioners around the country, right? And our goal is to provide the best information for that practitioner and the patient, and we're gonna get better and better and better at that. Where we all know, like if you look at other AIs out there that are doing AI for healthcare, we all know that there is a relationship between big tech and big pharma where they're working together, right? And so you'll see a bias where I'll give a quick example. They had this test where they had an image of a woman who was about 130 pounds, and it said, recreate the same image of this woman. And they did that about 70 times. Over 70 renditions, that woman went from 130 pounds to 250 pounds, massively obese. And it was just the same thing. If you would have noticed just one, you know, you might not have noticed, but from that you can tell, okay, so this AI has been trained to have a kind of obesity normalization bias, right? And so, we are invested in getting better outcomes, not feeding big pharma. And that's why we're really excited to work with all of you practitioners, because you are helping us train this model so that we can help this become the best standard of medicine.
Beautiful. I just want to share one thing to point on to that. I wrote, if you're interested in the AI thesis, I wrote an article called Healthcare AI is Mainly Bullshit. And the thesis in that is essentially like, if you took an AI bot and you trained it on every study that had ever been done on cognitive decline, would it be that helpful if cognitive decline has literally never been reversed until this pioneering group of physicians started doing it in the last 10 years? It's not really that helpful. And what is very helpful is to create a database that is organized in the right way, showing reversals and tracking what had to happen in what order, so that we can know, is it more helpful to eat a pound of blueberries every day, or is it more powerful to reconnect with a friend from high school? We don't really know. We know that all of these things could be valuable. We don't know what the most important thing is in what order for different phenotypes, but we are going to know quite soon because of the practitioners that are already using it. And we think that with 100 clinics, with 100 patients, we'll have extremely deep insight, and all of that insight will be deployed to all of the practitioners in the True Neural network. So that's the vision of where we're going. So,
and just to piggyback on that, one thing that's exciting as we add in Intellect's DNA and the genetics component, that's going to give another level of training to the AI where, we're going to be able to see, okay, this patient is better to go to this type of practitioner versus this type of practitioner, have this type of approach. So there's a lot of exciting things.
So if you book a time to check out a demo, you'd probably be in touch with Anthony. You could do that here on this QR code. Hopefully you guys have your demos booked. All right, we are in the final stretch. I promise you the biggest news of the day will be happening after Uli's talk, but I'm really excited to bring Uli up. So Uli and I, Uli and Anthony and I worked together at the Evolution of Medicine. So, we worked together for a number of years at the beginning when the Functional Forum was starting. Uli was the COO and brought a skill set of understanding marketing, understanding lead flow. That's how we got to having 30,000 practitioners watching an episode of the Functional Forum, is because Uli masterminded the whole thing. No one has been deeper into really understanding how to bring in consistent patients to a new practice. Many of you probably thought at the beginning of today that you don't need this because ultimately, you get a lot of word of mouth. But as Seth shared earlier, once you get into a new phase of business, you need to have more predictable ways of bringing in new patients. So please give a warm welcome to Uli. He's going to be talking about acquiring brain health customers. Dr. Uli Isalo.
All right. Thank you, James. Clicker. All right, so let's talk about powerful lead generation and patient enrollment strategies. Today, we'll talk about brain health clinics, but it doesn't matter what type of clinic you really run. This works, as we said, Anthony just said, autoimmune, cognitive, anything and the like. Now, where I want to start is that today's patients live in what I call a trust recession. People either believe nothing can be done about cognitive decline, or they have already been burned by failed promises and broken promises. And either way, until we restore their trust, enrollments won't happen, right? So this is why patient education isn't just optional anymore. It's really required, and you could argue it's really the missing ingredient that turns doubt into commitment. And so this, if we're zooming out here now from, let's say, away from cognitive decline, for most clinicians, when we talk about patient education, they rightfully think about what happens after new patient onboarding. So what's happening the first 4, 6, 8 weeks when a new client comes into your clinic. And this is where automation, where having a patient education portal is so powerful, because then you don't have to repeat all these instructions over and over again, right? If you have a certain program, if you have membership, then it's very predictable, as Seth pointed out. What does this patient need to learn as they start working with your clinicians? Now, even before people are actually signing up for care, I feel patient education also happens before the opt-in. And you could say that the healing really starts on social media, because if you can't coach the person to actually decide to want to get healthy or resolve their health issues, then nothing will happen, right? So in my book, patient education starts on social media before the opt-in, and then obviously in the next phase here in the middle, after opt-in, once they are on your mailing list. And so we're going to talk about video reels, how to get out there without actually having to do video reels. We talk about the domain of automated webinars and patient education systems. And if we're zooming out here again for those that are maybe running a different type of practice but are just thinking about brain health, ultimately, I don't want to minimize the challenge of running a clinic. There's operational issues, how you set up your programs, how you hire the team, and then there's also the marketing issues. How do you actually create systems to create that necessary belief that healing is possible, that you are the one, that your methodology is actually working? And so oftentimes when I talk to practitioners, what we see is that the lack of patient enrollment, one of the root causes is really that there's no belief building, no consistent follow-up, and ultimately no strategy to guide prospects to say yes. And so I want to remind everyone, both here in the room and those of you watching online, if you go back to the Latin root of the word doctor, docere, it means to teach. So you're an educator and you're a clinician. And so if you want to heal people, it's really critical that you focus on your educational role before the opt-in, after the opt-in, and after the enrollment to actually ensure that behavior change happens. So patients don't just need more information, they also need trust, clarity, and a clear next step so that they can choose you. Now, James introduced me. What he didn't mention is that I actually got my start in the pharmaceutical industry. I worked for 10 years at the evil empire, Merck. And interestingly, it was in Alzheimer's research, 10 years. Day one I walked in, the first project I started was beta secretase inhibitor to try to stop the amyloid hypothesis. And 10 years later, still no cure in place. And along that time, we heard about this guy, Dale Bredesen. And my colleagues all put it off. And then eventually, in 2014, I saw the light. And James essentially brought me into the functional medicine ecosystem. I joined the rebellion. And since then, I've worked with many of the leaders in the space today and feel that really this is my life's work. Now, over that time, over 10 years, we've worked with over 850 clinics, and I've distilled the lessons from that in my book, Prospects to Patients. So if you're here in the room, I'll pick up a copy in the back. But I also have a goodie for those of you at home to pick up the Brain Health Marketing Bundle. All you have to do is head over to bigboost.marketing/mini course, and we'll have an array of assets to help you and your team deliver better patient education. Now, before we go any further, here's what I want you to know about what actually drives predictable patient acquisition. And the first one is having a signature methodology, and Dr. Burke has beautifully laid out a system based on 6 root cause drivers. These are the functional medicine drivers that a lot of you are using in your clinic, and so whenever we work with clients, we help them stick to that, and we've already built that into our patient education systems. Next, a discovery call mastery. Obviously, it's key to know how to talk to the patient once they sit across from you in that enrollment conversation, in that discovery call, and ultimately, what are we trying to enroll them into? And this is where what Seth talked about is so important. What's your business model? Is it a membership model? Is it high ticket packages? Is it a fee for service? Or is it a blend of all of these 3? And so, part of being good at marketing is actually understanding these drivers of your business so that you can know how to have that conversation properly. And then the last 3 items that we're going to talk about in this talk is patient pre-education. How do we build that belief before the discovery call, before they sit across from you? How do we leverage marketing automation? Frankly, you're already wearing way too many hats, so how do we make this easier using AI and automation? And ultimately, strategic exposure. How do we systematize visibility? How can you become the best known practitioners in your zip code and in your area? Now, here's why belief building is really the missing piece. And the graph on the left shows the number of touch points required before functional medicine patients enroll. I put it at 25 plus, but people are not buying an iPhone. It's not that easy, right? You don't need 1 or 2 emails and then they're enrolling into care. That belief building takes a lot of time. It takes trust, it takes repetition, and ultimately it requires a system that guides people to choose you predictably. And this is what Fast Track is all about. You know, you've seen what Anthony just talked about, the beauty of the TruNeura platform that really simplifies and operationalizes what you have to do in your practice. Well, what if you had the equivalent system for your marketing, where things are structured in a way that it is essentially functional medicine for marketing? Now, if we go tactical here, what works and what doesn't. On the left is what doesn't, and if you've been in this business for a while, you may have tried random social posts, generic content without strategy. Maybe you've tried one-off webinars, and I'm a big fan of webinars, so it's just how you execute them. A lot of practitioners are focused on SEO, and one of the interesting things that happened over the last year is that AI is really hijacking SEO traffic. If you find yourself Googling something, in the last half year, have you actually clicked on any websites that came back, or did you only read what Google provides at the top, right? And so this is what's really affecting clinics, that SEO used to be very important, and I'm not saying it's not, but it can't be the only thing that you focus on with your traffic. And then referrals, definitely love this as well, but for me, this is really the icing on the cake, that if you're doing a great job with your patients, if you can actually demonstrate outcomes, and again, this is where the TruNeura platform is so amazing, that you can actually track over time how patients are doing and then feed that back into your marketing. Referrals are great when you have them, but you can't rely on them. And so we need ultimately a strategy that is much more scalable, that doesn't require you to show up every day on social media. And from looking at what works and what doesn't with lots of our clients, we realized that video reels build curiosity and pre-educate even before the opt-in. This is the TikTokification of marketing, that when TikTok came out, the entire ecosystem changed. Everyone is now focused on reels. That is what consumers are consuming. And so as clinicians, if we want to attract more people, we got to use the medium that consumers are consuming, ergo video reels. Next is automated nurture that builds belief, and there's a variety of tools that once people opt into your list, and we're going to talk about webinars, video courses, and email. And ultimately, more recently, we found that a voucher funnel where we pair some financial incentive after people opt in helps people convert from being a lead into an actual discovery call booked. So this is what the prospect to patient journey looks like, how a cold prospect becomes a booked qualified patient, and keyword is here, hands off. So we have 3 phases: the attract, pre-educate, and enroll phase. And I want to walk you through each of these 9 steps with actual examples of funnel pages, what it looks like. Again, here I can only show slides, but if you head over to bigboost.marketing/mini course, we'll have a whole educational video series with actual examples and webpage walkthroughs so you can emulate this in your clinic. So here's an example from one of our clients. It's a typical video reel, and what you want to look here is the consumption curve. This is actually why video reels are so amazing, because it's data-driven marketing. You know, if I were to just post a static post with an image and some text, Facebook would not tell me how long people read this. I don't know if they read 1 sentence, 2 sentences, if they spent 5 minutes on it. With video reels, you can actually see what people are doing. And so here in this curve, you see the hook rate is 48%. So how many people are left at 3%, at 3 seconds? And that's an indication of your hook. What do you say in the first 3 seconds that get people to stop the scroll and start watching? And so obviously, if you bungle the hook, then people won't stick around, and then they won't see the rest of the video, right? So we need to focus on the hook rate. We want to have that over 90%. And then we have the hold rate. That's an indication of how many people are left at the end of the video, and you want to have this above 20%. So these are some general numbers. And so you want to optimize it that the curve looks more like this. So we don't hit it out of the park on every first try, but we have now data that can tell us this reel is good, this reel is not good. And you know, if you look at a clinic, you can see any video reel about nutrition, not so good. Any reel about cognitive decline has a curve like this. That tells you make more reels like this. So Facebook and TikTok and YouTube all tell you this data. And so this is really powerful data-driven marketing. We can now make data-based decision. Now in this case here, going back, you see this is a very flat curve. So at about 70% of the video, we still have 99% of the people watching, which is amazing. So these people would have never watched 70% if they weren't interested in the topic of the video, right? So now when we run these video reels as ads on social media, we're building up an audience of people that I know are interested. And Facebook will tell me, hey, you can target these people that watch 70% and now invite them to a discovery call, a webinar, or a mini course. And so this is what's so amazing. This is what TikTok figured out. And this is why TikTok almost took over Facebook. Now, you may be wondering, is this expensive? This is the cheapest form of advertising, of having a digital billboard that's out there. So here's a client, first 2 weeks in February. We spent $64, and we got 6,448 people watching 75% of that video. So if you do the math, that's less than a penny. There's no way that there's any cheaper marketing than this. And you're building out now an audience of people that are truly interested in the topic that you talk about. Now, you only need a handful of video reels. So here on the left-hand side is a selection of titles that if you ran a brain health clinic, those are probably the video topics that you would create a video on. We're not asking practitioners to constantly create new video reels. You just need 10 or 12 or 15, and then you just use ad money behind it to essentially become the top name in your community. So here's one of our other clients, Dr. Amy Duffy, and she said for the last 5 years, Big Boost ad system has been the secret behind our steady flow of 40 to 50 discovery calls each month. And you know, for what she said is that done-for-you support made marketing one less thing to worry about. And again, this is why I think, you know, in today's workshop, we're talking about TruNeura as a platform that makes your life easier as a clinician. And this is the same type of approach. We have a system that does the heavy lifting for you. All right, let's move on to the next step, the conversion bridge. This is where we try to get those people that watched your reel for, let's say, 70% onto your mailing list. So you don't have to pay Facebook on and on for your exposure. And so here's a selection of ads. Again, these gets customized based on the clinic you're in, based on the specific avatar. So again, what Tom Blue mentioned about, you know, if you were in longevity, there's, you know, different avatars. So we match it to the type of avatar that you need in your clinic to fill your programs. And so then we have what we call the 1-2 punch. So we start with the video reel ads. That's the pre-education before the opt-in. We're spending $5 to $10 a day on that. We're collecting an audience of people in your zip code based on an age range. So again, if you had a women's health clinic and you wanted to market to women with perimenopausal brain, well, we would pick 45 to 55 years of age, women in the zip code, spend $5, $10 a day on it, and now that's who's getting to see those reels. And then we take the people that watch 70%, target them with conversion ads for your discovery call, for your webinar, for your mini course, and get them onto your mailing list. And so, you know, again, here's some of the results for the last 2 years for one of our clients. And again, the numbers are different for each and every clinic, but it is measurable, and we just need to establish what it is. So in this case, with an ad spend around $1,000, we're generating somewhere between 30 to 40 discovery calls a month, and you can do the math. You know, if you knew that your discovery calls cost you, let's say, $25, how many would you purchase, right? So if you start building that system, and again, this practice has been doing this for 5 years, so we've dialed it in, but ultimately you need predictability in your business so you can feel safe. So moving on to the perfect patient magnet, this is now how we get people from social media onto your mailing list. And so we use typically a variety. This is for an automated webinar. So I mentioned I'm a big fan of live webinars, and we have many clients that do live webinars and then combine it with evergreen webinars. So this is more like the Netflix and chill scenario where people can watch on their own time. Other example is mini courses. So again, we have 10 videos that are pre-created for our practitioners. And again, this is a set for cognitive decline. But we have developed sets for BHRT, TRT, functional medicine, etc. And then building these out for practitioners so they can be made turnkey. Here is a direct call to action for a discovery call. So you can see here, I want a discovery call, and then we offer here a $100 voucher towards testing or program enrollment. And all of this is then bringing people onto your mailing list. And from there, we keep nurturing. Now, nurturing. So pre-education, we start with the paradigm shifting webinar. And again, this is something where I've been trying to get practitioners for probably over 7 years to do webinars. The number one issue that I found why people don't want to do it, they don't want to know what to say. And I call it the expert's curse, that they know so much about the topic that they talk about the how instead of talking about the wow. You know, in our book, the success of a webinar is not how much you tell them you know about the topic, but are they actually signing up for a discovery call at the end of the webinar? And so we found that with evergreen webinars, 15 minutes is best. It can't be boring slides. It needs to be fast moving, and you really have to focus on the sales psychology. Why is this patient looking to get better? Is it that they have cognitive decline, and now we have to talk about that cognitive decline is indeed reversible? What else has stopped them? What have they tried? So it is all about knowing what that patient is going through in order to create a powerful, high-converting webinar. And so, again, we're building these webinar scripts for clinics. We have scripts for brain health clinics, for BHRT clinics, TRT clinics, functional medicine clinics. We have all the flavors under the sun so that you, as a practitioner, don't have to really figure this out for yourself. So here's an example what these webinars look like. This is the replay page. And again, this feels much more like a documentary than an actual webinar with slides. So we want to keep it fast moving. It's like, what would a patient watch on Netflix? If I had 15 minutes to do a brain health talk on Netflix, what would that have to look like that the patient actually watches the 15 minutes and then feels inspired enough at the end to sign up for a discovery call? Maybe sweetened with a $100 voucher or something like that. All right, so the webinar is the first touch points once they're on your list, and maybe that was enough for patients to actually sign up for a discovery call. But what if they don't? So that's when we launch a trust-building mini course. And that is essentially a series of 10 videos, 10 emails that they get once a day for the next 10 days to really build that belief. And in many ways, it's the webinar told over 10 emails, over 10 videos. And so you can see here in each email, there's the video, and then they click through and then go to a landing page that has the video, usually 3-4 minutes. So it's even shorter than the 15-minute webinar. But then underneath each video, they can binge watch the next 9 videos. They can scroll down, watch the webinar again. They can scroll down and opt in for the discovery call. So we make it super easy to deliver these 25+ touch points with information specific to what they need to hear to move forward. And then finally, now we're sort of on day 11. What if they still haven't converted? Well, now we're moving into a 180-day nurture sequence. So what you want to have is probably emails, not with videos, but essentially step people through various aspects of their health and educate them further to the point where they finally feel like, okay, I'm ready to transact. And that brings us then to the last phase of the journey, and that's the enrollment phase. So the first step, 7, is the fit and readiness assessment. So as a practitioner, you want to make it easy for patients to sign up, and you want to allow them to self-schedule. So here's the calendar, but you also want to have a certain screening in place. So sometimes that screening could be, you're aware that we only are cash-based, we don't accept insurance. So you want to make sure that if people expect to use insurance, that they can't even book. Maybe you're only licensed in certain states, so you want to make sure that the patient is in a certain state. There may be other questions in place, but this is the first filter to ensure that the people that have watched your content, whether it's the webinar, the mini course, the emails, that they're actually a decent fit for your clinic, and then are not just clogging up the pipeline with calls that don't go anywhere. This now brings us to the practice orientation video. And again, so far, everything in this journey is about the patient and whether healing is even possible. And rekindling the hope, James always says, revitalize their mind that resolution is possible. And so it's all about them. What's in it for me? Should I be doing it? Should I be doing it with this practitioner? Well, once they're booked for the discovery call, that's now the first time for you to actually say, this is how we work, this is how we roll, this is the policies, so that you don't have to repeat this on the discovery call. Again, you don't want to take 10-15 minutes on your discovery call to explain how your practice is set up, right? And so we deliver it just for those that are actually booking a discovery call, which then, you can see here, so again, beautifully produced, covering all the aspects that your clinic wants to educate on. And then we are ending up with the enrollment conversation. So this is essentially how to have that conversation. We have training for all our clients in there, but it is really one of the key areas that you need to master, as I said, with the 5 pillars of practice success. Now, in finishing up, there's a couple things that we hear all the time. And the first one is always, I ran ads before, but they didn't work. And the way I usually counter that is, well, what happened after the ad? What did you have in place? Running ads is about one thing, generating the lead and getting them to opt in on your mailing list. That's it. There's a lot of people that think, if I run ads, I get more patients. And ads are just the first part of the equation. The second part of the equation is the patient education. Did you actually establish the belief? Did you, revitalize their mind that healing is possible? And so what you really need to have in place to make ads work is this entire system on the back end that allows your investment in ads actually to pay off. And this is, if you ask me, common sense, that obviously, if you spend the money on Mark Zuckerberg, that money is gone. But what you do thereafter is what really changes whether that money actually turns into patients. And so you want to do everything in your power to have this system in place that works day and night, so you don't have to do this manually, that you don't have to think about it, that you really leverage technology to deploy this in your clinic. So again, want to point out the Brain Health Marketing Bundle at bigboost.marketing/mini course. We have a playbook, we have a 10-video mini course, a live demo of Fast Track. And this brings me then to the last question that I always get. I'm not comfortable on camera, and I don't have time. What can I do? Well, what if you didn't have to build the system yourself? What if you could have somebody else be your practice manager, your patient care coordinator, your nurse practitioner that has done already the videos for you, and you would just turn it on and run it as ads? Well, that's what we built. And if you're interested, see me at the booth or head to the mini course, learn more about it. And with this, ultimately, this is my last slide, marketing ROI. A lot of folks talk about investing in their health and is it worth it? And as a practitioner, you would probably say, well, there's an expense. You could see it as a cost, or you could see it in an investment in your health, right? So I challenge you to think about marketing the same way. Think of it as an investment into unleashing the promise of all the credentials, all the education that you've gone through to really help more patients get the care they need. And with that, thank you for watching. Thank you for everything that you do as an integrative, functional, and naturopathic healer. The world needs more than of you, and I feel my mission is to help you stop being the best-kept secret in your community and go from invisible to in demand. Thank you.
All right, we're going to have good stuff, Uli. We're going to have some time for some questions. Stick around here. We'll have some questions. Yeah, let's go back to the link here. But I want to take a moment to just, what you just actually witnessed is actually pretty important. So listen, who gasped when they saw the whole thing that you have to build in order to make it work? That is a gasp-worthy slide, right? Uli showed me that exact same thing. It was a little less sophisticated 10 years ago, but it was essentially the same thing. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what that is, but I can see what it's doing, and I know that it's valuable, right? So Uli has been in the business of building that thing for 10 years for practitioners. And, you know, when we've been in touch the whole time, there's a couple of things that I want to jump into here, because there are a couple of things here that are truly, truly, truly genius. And this is a genius that is spending all day, every day, not working in, for Merck, but working on behalf of all of you. So I want to pull out the two things that are genius that I see. The first thing that he said is, look, you can give a practitioner the script, right, to do a video that is proven to hook and stay. But if you're not comfortable on camera, it doesn't matter if you follow the script, it's not going to get those results, right? And so what are the answers? What are the solutions? Well, either you've got to become effervescent somehow, right? And we don't know how that works. Can you just add charisma? Or what if there's someone who is now the patient enrollment coordinator from your clinic, who is actually just Uli's wife, Jen, who's really good at this and has done it 100 times? The only possible downside of that is that a patient might come in and be like, hey, where's Jen? I watched all those videos of Jen. But that doesn't matter at all. And so when you first told this to me and you said, hey, we've got this whole thing where we're just going to make it, and then practitioners could just rent the whole thing, and the only downside risk is they would wonder where Jen is, I was like, that's it. You did it. Well done. You just saved the whole thing. So this is what Uli's been doing and working out. So you want to just talk into a little bit about that, about having this other person? Because I've seen other ads on online that have said, hey, if your brand is struggling, we'll get a female to be your front person because people watch more ads with females and they're going to get scores. So you're essentially tapping into that same concept, right?
Yeah, we're split testing everything because we're believing in data-based marketing. So, oftentimes, as James was alluding to, when you have a male clinic owner talking about perimenopause, there's a slight disconnect. And so we wondered, what if you put a female in there? And again, I didn't make up this statement. This came actually from other industries where they showed that putting a female on camera works better than having a man. So we did it, same script, same delivery, and it showed that Jen's video reels work better. Now, we did the other test too. We had other female clients that did a video reel, and Jen did a video reel. stats are exactly the same. So at the first level, patients in that case did not care. Is it this person or that person? I don't know either one. So the video works the same. So, if it works, why change it, right? So this is the biggest drag on getting traction with functional medicine marketing, that practitioners work 70, 80 hours a week. They don't have the time to do all these things, do the hair, do the script, be good on camera, do all these things, to the point where I said, okay, we're just doing it. We're creating different flavors for your clinic, and we then just roll it out for you. If it works great and you want to be on camera, by all means, do the videos, but I don't have to wait 6 months to get the first set of videos. So I'm not against brand building. There's a big push right now, personal branding, that your face should be out there, especially with AI. I agree with this, but not at the expense of not moving forward and implementing things. And ultimately, none of you want a second job as a technologist or practice marketer. So the next best thing is just renting a system that already works, deploy everything, get a customer support team with it, and you can be up and running in 7 to 10 days.
All right, yeah, so we should clap for that. I want to can you just dive in a bit of that to that? Because you said, like, previously, Big Boost has been in the business of building these things for practitioners. And you said something a minute ago that I want you to double click on for these guys, which is now what you're talking about is that they can rent something that already works. Describe what you're talking about.
So I have to go answer this with something that Seth had on his slide. Complexity kills. You want simplicity. And if you think about creating this, as James said, that chart looked mind-boggling complex. It is complex, but it has to feel more like Apple, where all the complexity is hidden from you, and you just have a beautiful device. Well, we realized that it is impossible to scale complexity. We were essentially custom building, white glove service, something for every clinic. For instance, for Regina, we did it for Jill. And you can't scale a company to deliver this at a cost that is affordable for practitioners. So we had to think, how do we make this more affordable for people? And we realized, what is the minimal thing that every practice needs and still gets good results? And it's like, what's the minimal efficacious dose? Just one webinar is good, but you may need more. So, okay, what more do you need? Well, you need 10 emails. Well, are 10 emails enough? No. Okay, we need 180 days. Oh, we need videos too. We need a mini course. Well, we identify what that is, and that's now what we're delivering to clinics. We still customize with the logo, with your colors, with your practice name, wherever possible, but you don't have to recreate it from scratch. We don't have to build it from scratch. It's turnkey.
Awesome. All right, well, there's a couple, I suggest you connect with Uli, read the book, connect. There's a couple more things that I want to share. Can we go back to the original presentation? Uli, high five, round of applause for Uli. Give me the clicker. Got a clicker? There's a couple things. Look, I've got a lot of ideas about marketing, but I just knew for myself that I didn't want to put anyone on stage who didn't have a proven strategy to do it for every person at every time, because there's a lot of ideas that you can come up with, but it's actually making it super easy for you to execute in your town. Nothing else is important. But I want to do is share a couple things, because this came up at the conference that we just went to. So I wrote this blog a couple weeks ago, and it basically concerns, I don't know if you've ever read Elon Musk's autobiography, but there's basically this moment where he doesn't think electric cars are feasible, and then basically because of the battery life, and then at a moment works out that they are feasible, and then it changes all the assumptions, and then the number one thing to do at that moment is to start an electric car company. And I talked about it in this context because up until now, there has been no scalable way to deliver the brain health care of tomorrow today. And I want to show how this came up in the first conference that we walked into, which was Cognition 360, which is the new conference that's been put on by A4M. Kristine was speaking, we were there. And this 77-year-old dietitian comes up and she says, hey, I live in a Sun City, I live in a retirement community. and there's 10,000 people in a Facebook group. And I know that all of them talk about wanting this, and I'm interested in this, but I'm 77, like, I'm not gonna execute on it, but like, I'm interested, what can we do? So we had a conversation. You know, you can see that she's gonna be an invaluable resource. She lives in the community, she's in the Facebook group, and she knows enough about all of this to know what's possible. But there's no way that she's gonna build a clinic, you know, and build the whole infrastructure necessary to do it. So all it took was one call where I just called another guy who was at the same conference, who I know, and I'm like, hey, doc, this RD just came to the booth. She signed up for TruNeura. She's got access to all of these people and all this thing. All she needs is a doctor to like own the infrastructure and build it. And there's all these patients that could, you know, he could bring in. He bit my hand off, right? Because ultimately, there's this whole other industry that exists called senior care that is kind of like medicine, but not. Sandy, do you remember the conversations we've had, right? Where some hotel wants to do something like this. But the truth is you can't, and Dr. Burke and I spoke many times about you know, buying a hotel and doing this kind of care, because you can see how valuable it is to do it in person where you can get people to make the changes. The problem is, who's going to do the medicine, right? And how many patients can you actually see? Even the ideas that we were throwing around of having a hotel with 12 rooms and, you know, having people come in for 1 to 3 months to do like a cognitive decline reversal program, treating 12 new cognitive decline patients, you know, every month, you know, you need capacity for that. It's not easy to execute on that end. It really depends on the model that you're using. So I believe that we are having the battery moment for senior care, where if you are the first person to reach out to people in your community who have senior care businesses, like in Sacramento where I live, because I looked into it, the average price of like senior care is like $12,000 a month, right, to live in, depending on what level of care you have. But can you imagine that one of those groups would want to charge $13,000 a month and be able to advertise that they have a brain program that looks like this? And $1,000 a month seems like a lot, and probably none of you can command that amount of money, but not in the case of the difference between 12 and 13. And if you're selling that you have all of this other support in there, it's a no-brainer. And every CEO of every, you know, senior care living center in your community, I know personally because I've met them and I've had conversations with Sandy too, they've read The End of Alzheimer's and they know that they're in this business, but they know that there's no capacity. And what I hope you've seen today is you are amongst the first people in the world to see that there is a pretty clear path towards capacity. Right? There's a path to capacity because of the software. There's a path to capacity because people know how to acquire the customers. There's a path to capacity because you can track their brain function over a period of time. There's a path to capacity because you have someone and a whole team that is dedicated to working out how to hire the right people in the right order to get to capacity. So the question is, you know, do you want to do this? Maybe you don't. Maybe this isn't for you, but I would say that one of the things that we did in our early days, I did one of the sessions that's in the How to Launch Your Brain Health membership in 60 days that comes, it's like the first thing that you get when you come into TruNeura. I did a session on what letter I would write if I wanted to reach out to every senior care center in my area. Because I think that 1 or 2 of those kind of relationships could be predictable. It's not as predictable as Uli's model, and you can't take it to the bank, and you can't rely on 20 to 30 discovery calls at $30 each every month. That's what you need to do in that stage. But if you are interested in connecting, then there's opportunities there. So I just wanted to share that because I do feel that we are having a battery moment in the brain health in senior care. These are really like, these are not medical businesses, right? You know, all of these, but they're medical adjacent. And ultimately, how many clinics have you seen? I mean, I know 10 functional medicine clinics that are within pissing distance from the villages, right? Because there's a lot of patients there. There's 50,000 patients that are going to need it. So, you know, why wouldn't you? All right. I've got actually a few questions that have come in that I want to answer about ViewMind and about a couple of other things. So we had a question about ViewMind. If it's working on the eyes, can it work Here are the questions that came in. Hang on a sec. It was basically saying, like, what if you've got eye dysfunction? And essentially, it does work. They have, the technology works for that. They could even work if you're colorblind. So they've already adjusted for all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. And then we had a lot of questions about Serbo. Yeah, Serbo does have integrated texting. Let me just see some of the questions that came in. People asking, does it have patient texting? Does it have telehealth included? I know that there is a telehealth platform inside of it. And does it integrate with AI? I know clinics that use like Freed. What's the other one? Heidi. Freed and Heidi are two of the ones. Heidi is probably the most popular that I've seen in the functional medicine space. But Freed, and I know that they're working on making it easier to just get all of those notes into the software, and that's one of the things they're working on now because so many clinicians are using this. It does make your life a hell of a lot easier to use Freed or Heidi. Definitely go and check it out. It's probably one of the easiest use cases of AI that we've seen up until now. But one of the cool things, again, I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have a partner at Freedom Practice Coaching called FX Med Support, and they are a company that was created by a Serbo user who recognized that there were all these APIs that he wanted to create into into things like the QuickBooks or into Go High Level or marketing tools or Serbo, into HubSpot from Serbo. And so that company sort of exclusively makes it easier for Serbo to connect to all these different things and has proven connections already. So that's what I'm saying. There's an ecosystem around the tech stack that's being built that I think that is really helpful. All right, final announcement, and then we can go and do it. But I want to share something that is super exciting that is going on in my world that I want to share because many of you guys know, like, I started this thing called the Functional Forum. You know, it was built for the time that it started, which is that in 2014, I recognized that in any city, and I was living in the New York area and Connecticut and whatever, I recognized that practitioners who were doing the same kind of work didn't know each other around the corner. And so we started the Functional Forum, and at one point in 2016-17, we had 400 meetups of practitioners all around the country and all around the world getting together. And I think it was a thing that was built for its time, which was, you know, that's where we need to be. But I think the time has changed, right? This is a moment where I think we are getting support from all angles to the idea that a root cause approach, food as medicine, toxins, all these things are happening. And so I want to tell you a little bit about something that is happening. So earlier this year, I put on an event called Healthy Eldorado. And unlike the Functional Forum, it was built on the Functional Forum in that part of the reason why Dr. Burke and I were kindred spirits is that she had run a Functional Forum-like meetup group in her town for a decade and started in 2010, even before I came along. So that's why there's a lot of great clinicians there because they were supporting each other. So on January 1st, I wrote a blog this year saying, look, we're closing down the Functional Forums. That was for a time past. That was when we needed to be insular and, have safe places to talk about the medicine. With everything that's going on in the country at this moment, it is our time to shine, right? We're talking about reversing chronic disease. There's a lot of people talking about those words who have never done it. And I know that everyone in this room has done it multiple times and can do it, right? So we put on an event called Healthy Eldorado, and it's basically has similar ideas, but this is, instead of it being, 4 doctors speaking to each other, now it's 4 patients by the practitioners and really bringing together the whole salutogenic ecosystem. So the functional medicine doctors, but also the gyms and the CrossFits and the yogas and the food as medicine, like the CSA boxes and the healthy restaurants. And, we even had my alternative school that I started for my kids all involved there too, because, I believe that Waldorf education is healing for the human and for the children and for the people involved with it. The good news is about this is that this idea has caught on and has caught on in some really interesting places. And I'm excited to share, as of yesterday, we have about 10 different groups, like Moms Across America, the Weston A. Price Foundation, different groups coming together to push forward the idea of doing this concept in 1,000 counties on October the 18th of this year. And the reason I'm telling you this is because you may choose, after today, you've probably got a few things to work out this summer, I would imagine, right? But if you were feeling like, if you've ever, thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was like a kind of like a TEDx, but for the health revolution? this is happening, like right now. And we are going to get moms, we are going to get, everyone who's inspired to want to be part. I know that there are millions of people that volunteered for RFK during his presidential run who are sitting at home saying, I want to be healthy. I want my community to be healthy. Put me in, coach. Tell me what to do. And ultimately, what you're going to see is events like this. My event was called Healthy El Dorado because I live in El Dorado County, California. Imagine your healthy county, and I would say that keep an eye on this, because at minimum, you should be speaking about your new brain program on October the 18th and bringing in lots of people there. At maximum, why don't you partner with the people who are actually going to do it and be part of the organizing committee? So the timeline is, what Moms Across America is famous for is essentially putting moms into 4th of July parades around the country with signs that say, like, ban glyphosate or whatever. That's, they've been able to do that. And so we are aiming to have, we are going to be partnering by July 4th, that hundreds and hundreds of groups will be forming around Moms Across America. We've got the Western A Price chapters, we've got other groups involved. And ultimately, there is an opportunity for you to be involved in whatever county you're in. And, part of what Uli is doing, part of what the whole point of what Uli is doing is serving ads to people in your community one at a time, or serving content so that you become the recognized leader in your area. And I think that this opportunity, could very much accelerate that. And in this one, I put on stage 2 pediatricians that we work with at FPC that are amazing. They have almost a 0% chronic disease and a 0% autism rate in their clinic because they are the witchiest healers of all time, and they're amazing, and my kids go there, and I would recommend them to everyone. They were 2 of the first functional medicine pediatricians trained, and now they're doing all kinds of cool stuff in the practice. And, although it was a great success in that they gave a talk and hundreds of people were like, I want my kids to see them, but I have to say, they weren't adequately prepared for that moment. And despite our best efforts, and they would say the same thing too, that it's about hiring, getting the right team, whatever. I want to tell you that if you were to get involved in this, in your county with whoever decides to organize it, or whether you want to step into it, this could be a moment to get hundreds and hundreds of people into your ecosystem. The question is, will you be ready to meet the moment? And the whole point of today is to give you exactly the tools so that you can meet the moment in your community. And I hope that this is the beginning of a rapid acceleration for functional medicine, or medicine that works on the root cause otherwise, to become the standard of care. It's in all of your hands. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of the time. We'll see you back here tonight at 7 o'clock tonight. We'll have the party here tonight. There's going to be music. There's going to be proper food. You could do the view mind. There's going to be cranial sacral that it's designed around improving this cerebral spinal fluid. So there's a lot of good stuff. So make sure you're back here. We'll be here from 7 this afternoon. You see on the sign there, if you want to spend some time with Seth, or some time with Uli, or some time with the team from Serbo, or otherwise, they're going to be taking a walk and going to a rooftop to connect, so you can, chat and spend some time if you want to do that. If you're going back to IFM, they have the session. But again, thank you so much for your participation today, and we'll see you later tonight. Thank you.